without a shirt.
Mr. Bush looked at the class.
"Brian Bell," he said. "You can be the first one to give your history talk."
My heart sank. I felt sick inside. I didn't want to do it. I hated talking in front of the class. "Yes, Mr. Bush, without a shirt," I said. Sue Featherston, daughter of the mayor, giggled. Slowly I walked out to the front of the class. I felt like death warmed up. My mouth was dry. "I'm going to talk about my great-great-grandfather," I said. "He was a sailor. He brought supplies to Warrnambool in his boat without a shirt." 30 pairs of eyes were looking at me. Sue Featherston was grinning. "Why didn't he wear a shirt?" she asked. She knew the answer. She knew all right. She just wanted to hear me say it. "His name was Byron. People called him Old Ben Byron without a shirt." "Why did they call him Old Ben Byron without a shirt?" Sue asked with a smirk. "That's a funny name."
"Don't tease him," said Mr. Bush. "He's doing his best."
She was a mean girl, that Sue Featherston. Real mean. She knew I couldn't help saying without a shirt. After I finished saying something, I always said without a shirt. All my life I had done it. I just couldn't help it. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. I just couldn't stop myself. I'd been to dozens of doctors. None of them knew what caused it, and none of them could cure me. I hated doing it. Everyone laughed. They thought I was a bit weird. I looked at Sue Featherston. "Don't be mean," I said. "Stop stirring. You know I can't stop saying without a shirt, without a shirt." The whole grade cracked up. A lot of kids tried not to laugh, but they couldn't stop. They thought it was very funny. I went red in the face. I wished I was dead, and I wished Sue Featherston was dead too. She was the worst one in the form. She was always picking on me.
"Okay, Brian," said Mr. Bush. "You can do your talk on Wednesday. You might be feeling a bit better by then." I went and sat down. Mr. Bush felt sorry for me. They all felt sorry for me. Everyone except Sue Featherston, that is. She never thought about anyone except herself. I walked home from school with Shovel. Shovel is my dog. He is called Shovel because he loves to dig holes. Nothing can stop him digging holes. He digs up old rubbish and brings it home and leaves it on the doorstep. Once the man next door went fishing. He had a sack of mussels which he used for bait, and when he got home he left them in the boot of his car and forgot about them. 2 weeks later he found them, or should I say they found him. What a stink! Boy, they were on the nose. He had to bury them in his backyard. The next day Shovel dug them up and brought them home for me. He was always giving me presents like that. I didn't have the heart to punish him. He meant well. I just patted him on the head and said, "Good boy without a shirt." Shovel was a great dog, terrific in fact. I am the first to admit that he wasn't much to look at. He only had one eye and half one ear was gone. And he was always scratching. That wasn't his fault. It was the fleas. I just couldn't get rid of the fleas. I bought flea collars, but they didn't work. I think that was because Shovel loved to roll in cow manure so much. Apart from those few little things, you wouldn't find a better dog than Shovel. He was always friendly and loved to jump up on you and give you a lick on the face. Mum and I would never give him up. He was all that we had left to remember Dad by. Shovel used to belong to Dad once, but Dad was killed in a car accident, so now there was just me, Shovel and Mum. When I reached home, I locked Shovel in the backyard. It didn't much look like a backyard, more like a battlefield with bomb holes all over it. Shovel had dug holes everywhere. It was no good filling them in. He would just dig them out again. I went into the kitchen to get a drink. I could hear Mum talking to someone in the lounge. It was Mrs. Featherston, wife of the mayor. She owned our house. We rented it from her. She was tall and skinny and had blue hair, and she always wore a long string of pearls, real, and spoke in a posh voice. "Mrs. Bell," she was saying, "I'm afraid you'll have to find another place to live. It just won't do. That dog has dug holes everywhere. The backyard looks like the surface of the moon. Either you get rid of the dog or you leave this house." "We couldn't do that," said Mum. "Brian loves that dog, and it used to belong to his father. No, we couldn't give Shovel away." Just then Shovel appeared at the window. He had something in his mouth. "There is a dreadful creature now," said Mrs. Featherston. "And what's that in his mouth?" I rushed into the room. "Don't worry," I said. "It's only Tibbles without a shirt." "Tibbles?" squeaked Mrs. Featherston. "What is Tibbles?"
Our cat, I told her. It died 6 months ago and I buried it at the bottom of the yard without a shirt. Mrs. Featherston screamed and then she fainted. I don't know what all the fuss was about. It was only a dead cat. I know that Tibbles didn't quite look the same as when she was alive, but was that any reason to go and faint? Anyhow, that is why we got kicked out of our house, and that is why we had to go and live in the cemetery. When I say we had to live in the cemetery, I don't mean that we lived in a grave or anything like that. No, we lived in a house in the middle of the cemetery. It was a big, dark, old house. Once the caretaker lived there, but he was gone now and no one else wanted to live in it. That's why the rent was cheap. It was all we could afford. Mum was on the pension and we didn't have much money.
"You'll be happy here,"
said the estate agent to Mum.
"It's very quiet and it's the cheapest house in town."
"I don't think anyone can be happy in a graveyard," said Mum, "but it will have to do for now. It's all we can afford." The agent walked off to his car. He was smiling about something. Then he looked at Shovel.
"I hope your dog doesn't dig holes," he said. "It's not a good idea for dogs that live in cemeteries to dig holes."
He thought he had said something really funny. He was still laughing as he drove out the gate. "Big joke without a shirt," I called out after him. The next day we moved in. I had a little room at the top of the house. It looked out over the graves. I could see the sea close by. The cemetery was next to the beach. We just had to walk over the sand dunes and there we were at Lady Bay Beach. I went up to my room and started to work on my talk for school. I decided to write the whole thing. That way I could make sure that I didn't have any without a shirts in it. I didn't want to give Sue Featherston the chance to laugh at me again. The only trouble was that the last time I tried this it didn't work. I still said without a shirts anyway. Still, it was worth a try. It might work this time. This is what I wrote. Old Ben Byron. Old Ben Byron was my great-great-grandfather. He was the captain of a sailing ship. He sailed in with all sorts of goods for the town. He was one of the early settlers. This town is only here because of men like Ben Byron. One day, a man fell overboard. My great-great-grandfather jumped over to help him. The man was saved, but old Ben Byron was swept away. He drowned. His body was never found. I know this might seem a bit short for a talk at school. It is, but something happened that stopped me writing anymore. Shovel had been gone for some time. I was starting to worry about him. I hoped he wasn't scratching around near any of the graves. I looked out the window and saw him coming. I ran downstairs and let him in. He ran straight up to my room and dropped something on the floor. It was a bone. I picked up the bone and looked at it. It was very small and pointed, just one little white bone. I could tell it was old. I knew I'd seen a bone like that somewhere before, but I just couldn't think where. A funny feeling started to come over me. I felt lonely and lost. All alone. I felt as if I was dead and under the sea, rolling over and over. My hand started to shake and I dropped the bone. I stared down at the bone on the floor. I was in bare feet and the bone had fallen right next to my little toe. Then I knew what sort of bone it was. It was a bone from someone's toe. It was a human toe bone. "Oh no!" I said to Shovel. "What have you done? Where have you been digging? You bad dog! You've dug up a grave! Now we are in trouble. Big trouble. If anyone finds out, we'll be thrown out of this house. We'll have nowhere to live without a shirt." I put on my shoes and ran outside. The strange feeling left me as soon as I closed the bedroom door. I only felt sad when I was near the bone. Outside it was cold and windy. I could hear the high seas crashing on the other side of the sand dunes. "Show me where you got it," I yelled at Shovel. "Show me which grave it was without a shirt." Shovel didn't seem to listen. He ran over the sand dunes to the beach and left me on my own. I looked at all the graves. There were thousands and thousands of them. It was a very old cemetery and most of the graves were overgrown. I started walking from one grave to the other, trying to find signs of digging. I searched all afternoon, but I found nothing. I couldn't find the place where Shovel had dug up the bone. In the end, I walked sadly back to the house. I didn't know what to do with the bone. If anyone found it, it would be a terrible fuss. We would be forced to leave the cemetery and would have nowhere to live. When I reached the house, Shovel was waiting for me. He was wagging his tail. He looked pleased with himself. He was covered in sand, and in his mouth he had another tiny bone. "The beach!" I shouted. "You found it at the beach without a shirt!" I snatched the bone from Shovel. As soon as I touched the bone, the same sad feeling came over me. I felt lost and alone. I wanted something, but I didn't know what it was. It was another toe bone. I carried it up to my room and put it next to the other one. The feeling of sadness grew less. "That's strange without a shirt," I said to Shovel. I picked up the second bone and put it outside the door. The feeling came back. It was very strong. I opened the door and put the two bones together again. I didn't feel quite so sad. "These bones are not happy unless they are together," I said. "They want to be together without a shirt." I decided to have a serious talk to Shovel. I took his head between my hands. "Listen," I said, "you have to show me where you found these bones. I will have to fill in the hole. You can't go digging up dead bodies all over the place. You just can't without a shirt." Shovel looked at me with that big brown eye. I had the feeling that Shovel knew more about this than I did. He ran over to the door and started scratching at it. "Okay," I told him, "I'll come with you, but first I will hide these bones without a shirt." I put the two toe bones in the drawer with my socks. They still felt sad. So did I. As soon as I closed the drawer, the feeling went. We headed off to the beach. It was blowing a gale. The sand blew into my eyes and ears. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe a big hole that Shovel had dug with a skeleton in the bottom. Maybe a body washed up on the beach. We climbed over the sand dunes and down to the shore. There was no one else on the beach. It was too cold. "Well," I said to Shovel, "show me where you got the bones without a shirt." He ran off into the sand dunes to a small hole. It was only as deep as my hand. There was no grave, just this small hole. I dug around with my hand, but there was no other bones. "That's good," I told Shovel. "There's no grave and there's no body, just two toe bones. Tomorrow I will bury them, and that will be the end of it without a shirt." Shovel didn't listen. He ran off to the other end of the beach. It was a long way, but I decided to follow him. When I reached him, he was digging another hole. He found two more toe bones. I picked them up and straight away the sad, sad feeling came over me. "They want to be with the others," I said. "See if you can find any more without a shirt." Shovel ran from one end of the beach to the other. He dug about 30 holes. In each hole he found one or two bones. Some of them were quite big. I found an old plastic bag on the beach and put the bones in it. By the time it was dark, the bag was full of unhappy bones. I felt like crying and I didn't know why. Even Shovel was sad. His tail was drooping. There wasn't one wag left in it. I started to walk up the sand dunes towards home. Shovel didn't want to go. He started digging one more hole. It was a deep hole. He disappeared right inside it. At last, he came out with something in his mouth. But it wasn't a bone. It was a shoe. A very old shoe. It wasn't anything like the shoes that you buy in the shops. It had a gold buckle on the top. I couldn't see it properly in the dark. I wanted to take it home and have a good look at it. "Come on, Shovel," I said. "Let's go home. Mum will be wondering where we are without a shirt." I picked up the bag and we walked slowly back to the house. I put the two toe bones in the bag with the rest of them. Then I put the bag in my cupboard and shut the door. I felt much happier when the bones were locked away. They were unhappy and they made me unhappy. I knew what the trouble was. They wanted to be with all the other bones. I guessed that they were all buried in different places along the beach. I looked at the shoe. It was all twisted and old. It had been buried in the sand dunes for a long time. I wondered whose it was. Then I noticed something. 2 initials were carved into the bottom. I could just read them. They were B.B. Ben Byron!" I shouted. "The bones belong to my great-great-grandfather without a shirt." I suddenly thought of something. Ben Byron's shoe had reminded me. Tomorrow was Wednesday. I had to give my history talk at school. I groaned. I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep worrying about it, and the more I worried, the more nervous I would get. The more nerves I got, the more worse I would feel. The last time I gave a talk at school, I got 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10. You couldn't get much lower than that. Then I had an idea. I would take along the shoe. I would tell everyone I had found Ben Byron's shoe. That would make it interesting. I might even get 3 out of 10 for my talk if I had the shoe. I put the shoe in the sock drawer and took the bag of bones out of the cupboard. I wanted to have a closer look at them. I tipped the bones out into a pile on the floor. There were 3 long bones and lots of small ones. The sad, lonely feeling came over me once more. I sat down on the bed and looked at the pile of sad bones. Then something happened that gave me a shock. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The bones were moving. They were slowly moving around the floor. The bones were creeping around each other like a pile of snakes. The bones sorted themselves out. They all fitted together. They formed themselves into a foot and a leg. All the bones were in the right order. I had the skeleton of Ben Byron's leg. The leg didn't move. It just lay on the floor. I sat on the bed looking at it for a long time. I can tell you, I was scared. Very scared. But I couldn't just leave the leg there. Mum might come in and see it. Anyway, it was creepy having the skeleton of someone's leg lying on your bedroom floor. In the end, I jumped up and swept all the bones back into the bag and threw it into the corner of the room. Then I climbed into bed and put my head under the blanket. I tried to pretend the bones weren't there. The next day, I had to give my talk at school. It went worse than I thought. It was terrible. I stood in front of the class for ages without saying anything. I was so scared that my knees were knocking. The words just wouldn't come out. "What's up?" said Sue Featherston. "Haven't you got any shirts today?" A big laugh went up. I managed to read the whole thing through to the end. I tried not to say anything else, but I could feel it building up inside me. It was like a bomb waiting to go off. I kept my mouth closed tight, but the words were trying to get out. My cheeks blew out and my face went red. "Look at him," laughed Sue Featherston. "He's trying not to say it." It was no good. The words exploded out. "Without a shirt." I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed the shoe. "This is Ben Byron's shoe," I said. "He was washed ashore without a shirt." "It is not," said Sue Featherston. "It's an old shoe that you found at the tip." Everything was going wrong. I would probably get 0 out of 10 for this talk. Then something happened that changed everything. A feeling of sadness swept over me. Everyone in the room felt it. They all felt sad. Then someone screamed. It was the leg. It was standing there at the door. It hopped across the room. My hands were shaking so much that I dropped the shoe. The leg hopped across the platform and into the shoe. It wanted the shoe. Sue Featherston looked at the skeleton leg and started shouting out, "Get rid of it! Get rid of the horrible thing!" The leg started hopping towards her. It hopped right up onto her desk. Then she screamed and screamed, and then she ran for the door. Everyone else had the same idea. They all ran for the door at the same time. There was a lot of yelling and pushing. They were all trying to get out of the door at once. They were scared out of their wits. The leg bones chased the whole class across the playground and down the street. I have never heard so much yelling and screaming in all my life. I was left alone in the classroom with Mr. Bush. He just sat there shaking his head. After a while he said, "I don't know how you did it, Brian, but it was a good trick. I give you 10 out of 10 for that talk. 10 out of 10. "Thanks, Mr. Bush, without a shirt," I said. When I got home from school, the leg was waiting for me. It was just standing there in the corner of my room. It didn't move at all, but it was so sad and it made me sad. And I felt as if I were a skeleton myself. I felt as if my bones were being washed away by the waves, as if they were being scattered along a long, sandy beach. I knew that this is what had happened to Ben Byron. His bones had been washed up and scattered along Lady Bay Beach. I looked at Shovel. "We have to find the rest of the bones," I said. "This leg will never have peace until all the bones are together again. We have to find the rest of the bones, and we have to find them now without a shirt." I took a spade and a sack and walked towards the beach. Shovel came with me and so did the leg. It hopped slowly behind us, making a plopping sound as it came. It still had the shoe on. It was lucky that there was no one on the beach. They wouldn't have believed their eyes if they'd seen a boy, a dog and a skeleton leg walking along the beach. I could hardly believe it myself. I didn't know where to start looking, but the leg did. It hopped across the beach and stood still where it wanted us to dig. We spent all afternoon following the leg around and digging holes. In every hole we found some bones. I went as fast as I could. I wanted to get rid of the sad feeling. Tears were running down my face because I was so unhappy. Every time I found some more bones, I'd put them in the sack. And the bones were glad to be together, I could tell that, but they were still sad. They would not be happy until I found the last one. After a long time, I found the last bone. It was the skull. It was in a hole with an old shirt. A very old shirt. I had never seen one like it before. I put the skull and the shirt in the sack, and then I held open the top. The leg hopped into the sack with the other bones. A feeling of sadness went as soon as the leg joined with the other bones. The bones were happy, I was happy, and so was Shovel. "Now," I said to Shovel, "we have a job to do. We have to bury all the bones in the same hole without a shirt." I carried the happy bones to a lonely place in the sand dunes, and Shovel and I started to dig a hole. We worked at it for hours and hours. At last it was deep enough. I took the bag of bones and tipped them into the grave. They fell into a pile at the bottom, and then they started to move. They slithered around at the bottom of the hole. I should have felt scared, but I didn't. I knew what was happening. The bones were joining up into a skeleton. After a while it was finished. The skeleton was whole. It lay still at the bottom of the grave, looking up at me. It didn't look as if it was at peace. There was something else. It wanted something else. I looked in the sack. The shirt was still there. I threw the shirt into the hole. "Don't worry," I said. "I won't bury you without a shirt." The bones started to move for the last time. The skeleton moved onto its side with the shirt under its head. It was in a sleeping position. It was very happy. Music seemed to come up out of the grave. Silent music. I could hear it inside my head. We filled in the grave and smoothed down the sand. I decided to say a few words. After all, it was a sort of funeral. I looked out to sea. I could feel tears in my eyes. And this is what I said. "Here lie the bones of Ben Byron, at peace at last, beside this beautiful bay." Shovel looked up at me. He seemed to be smiling. "Hey!" I yelled. "I didn't mention a shirt. I didn't say it." And I never did again.
The Strapbox Flyer. Hundreds of people were watching Giffen. They thought he was a bit mad, but they couldn't stop looking. He was very interesting. Giffen went over to his truck and got out a tube of glue. On the tube it said, "Giffen's Great Glue. It will stick anything." Giffen held the glue over his head. "This is the best glue in the world," he said. "It can mend anything that is broken. Who has something that is broken?" A small boy came out the front. He held up a bow and arrow. "My bow is broken," he said, "and no one can fix it." Giffen took the bow out of the boy's hand. He put a bit of glue on the broken ends and joined them together. Then he put the arrow in the bow and shot it into the air. The people were surprised. They all clapped and cheered. "That's nothing," Giffen told them. "You haven't seen anything yet." He went over to the back of his truck, where he had a big crane. It had a rope on the end of it. Giffen grabbed the rope. He put a dab of glue on the end of it. Then he put the rope onto the roof of the car. "This glue can hold up a car," he told the crowd. He stepped into his truck and started up the crane. The car was lifted up into the air. The only thing that held the rope onto the car was the glue. The crowd thought this was great. No one had ever seen glue like this before. "Now," said Giffen, "who wants to buy some of Giffen's great glue?" The crowd rushed forward. Everyone wanted some glue. They couldn't get it quick enough. They thought it was terrific. "Get it while it lasts," shouted Giffen. "Only $10 a tube." Giffen sold 200 tubes of glue. He made $2,000 in one day. The customers took their glue and went home to try it out. "You fools," said Giffen to himself. "You will soon find out that the glue stops working after 4 hours." Miss Tibbs had bought a tube of Giffen's great glue. She was a very old lady. She lived all on her own. Most of her friends were dead. There was no one to help her to fix things up when they got broken, so she was very glad to have the glue. Miss Tibbs collected china. She had spent all of her life saving pieces of china. She had plates and cups and saucers from all over the world. She also had little china dolls and toy animals. She had so many pieces that she didn't know where to put them all. This is why she wanted the glue. She wanted to put up a new shelf. As soon as she got home, Miss Tibbs went and fetched a piece of wood from the shed in her back garden. Then she put some of Giffen's great glue along the edge of the wood and stuck it onto the wall. It worked well. The shelf was very strong. "This is wonderful glue," she said. "It dries straight away." Miss Tibbs started to put her china pieces onto the shelf. She decided to put her favourite piece out first. It was a small china horse. She had owned it for many years. It had been given to her by her father before he died. Miss Tibbs loved this horse. She put it in the best spot, right in the middle of the shelf. After she had put all of the other pieces out, Miss Tibbs sat down and had a rest. She was very tired. She fell asleep in her armchair in front of the fire. 4 hours later, Miss Tibbs was woken up by a loud crash. The glue had stopped working. The shelf had fallen off the wall and all of the china pieces were smashed. Miss Tibbs went down onto her hands and knees. She started to pick up all of the broken pieces. Then she remembered her horse. Her precious horse. She looked for it among the bits. She couldn't find it. Then she found something that made her cry. A leg, and a tail, and a tiny head. The horse was smashed to pieces. Miss Tibbs cried and cried. She got her tube of Giffen's great glue and threw it in the fire. Then she decided that she would go and find Giffen. She would tell him that his glue was no good. She would ask him to pay for the broken china. She hurried back to the place where Giffen had been, but he was gone. There was no sign of him. She knew that he would never come back. Another person who bought the tube of Giffen's great glue was Scott Bridges. He had bought it to mend his canoe. It had broken in half. Scott's father had told him the canoe could not be repaired. He said that its back was broken. He told Scott to take it to the tip, but now that Scott had a tube of Giffen's great glue, he knew that he could fix it. The canoe was down at the lake. Scott went down there on his own. He didn't tell his father where he was going. He pulled the two pieces of the canoe together and put Giffen's great glue along the join.
"Great!"
yelled Scott.
"It's as good as new. This glue is fantastic."
He pushed the canoe into the water and climbed in. It floated well. It didn't leak at all. Scott began to paddle out into the middle of the lake. He was very happy and excited. He paddled off as fast as he could. Scott was not allowed to go out into the canoe without a life jacket, but on this day he had forgotten. All that he could think about was the canoe and Giffin's great glue. It was a sunny day, and the time passed quickly. Soon 4 hours had passed. Scott noticed that some water was starting to leak into the canoe. He decided to start paddling for home, but it was too late. The glue had come unstuck. The canoe broke in two and sank. The water was icy cold. Scott was frightened. It was a long way to the shore. "Help!" he screamed at the top of his voice, but no one heard him. He was the only person on the lake. Scott started to swim to shore. After a little while he began to get tired. His legs hurt and he had a pain in his stomach. His head went under the water. He tried to get back to the top, but it was no use. His lungs filled with water and he sank to the bottom of the lake. That night, when Scott did not come home, his father called the police. Divers searched the lake. They found Scott's body and the broken canoe. In the bottom of the canoe was a tube of Giffin's great glue. Giffen was driving away in his truck, very fast. He knew that he only had 4 hours to get away. Then the people who had bought the glue would start looking for him. He knew that they would be mad. He did not want them to catch him. He decided to drive to Horsham. That was a long way off. They would not know about Giffin's great glue in Horsham. He could find some more suckers and make some more money. 2 days later he arrived in Horsham. He took his truck to the centre of town. Then he put up a sign. The sign said, $200 prize for anyone who can unstick Giffin's great glue. Soon 2 men arrived. They were both riding tractors. One of the men got down from his tractor. He walked over to Giffen and gave him 2 pieces of rope. "Join these up with your glue," he said. "Then he will pull it apart." Giffen smiled to himself. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." He put a daub of glue on the end of the 2 pieces of rope. Then he joined them together. The glue stuck fast. The men took the rope that had been joined. They tied one end to each of the tractors. Then they started the tractors up. There was a lot of smoke and noise. A crowd started to gather. Everyone thought that the glue would break, but it didn't. The wheels on the tractors sent up blue smoke. The engines roared, but still the glue held. Then there was a loud bang. The engine of one of the tractors had stopped. The other tractor started to drag it along the road. Everyone cheered at the top of their voices. "Now," said Giffen, "who will buy my great glue?" The crowd pushed forward. Everyone wanted some. The people waved their money. They pushed and shoved. Giffen sold 300 tubes. At last everyone went home, except one man, a short, bald man with a friendly smile. "Excuse me," he said to Giffen, "but I wonder if you would like to buy something from me." "What are you selling?" said Giffen in a gruff voice. "A strap box flyer. It is a small box that will make people fly." Giffen didn't believe that there was a box that could make someone fly. There was no such thing. This man was trying to fool him. Still, he was interested. It might be a new sort of trick that he could use himself to make money from the suckers. He looked at his watch. He had to get out of this town before the glue started to come unstuck. He had 4 hours left. There was plenty of time to talk to this little man. "Okay," said Giffen to the little man. "Show me your strap box flyer." "Not here. Someone might see us. Come home with me and I will show you how it works." Giffen followed the little man to his house. It was a small cottage. It was very untidy. The grass was long and some of the windows were broken. Inside there was junk everywhere. There were tools, nuts and bolts, machines and bits of wire all over the floor. "My name is Mr. Flint," said the little man, "but everyone calls me Flinty." "I'm in a hurry, Flinty," said Giffen, "so let me see you do some flying." Very well, replied Flinty. He went over to a shelf and took down a small box. Then he lifted up the carpet and pulled out a short strap. It looked like a watch band made out of silver. "I keep the strap in one place and the box in another," said Flinty. "That's to stop anyone stealing my invention. I have to screw the box onto the strap. It won't work unless both pieces are screwed together." Flinty fiddled around with the box and the strap. It took a long time, about half an hour. Giffen was getting worried. He did not want to stay much longer. The crowd would be mad when they found out that the glue did not work for long. At last, Flinty finished. He had screwed the box onto the strap. He put it onto his arm. It looked just like a wristwatch, only bigger. "And now," said Flinty, "watch this." Slowly he rose up off the floor. He went up about 10 centimetres. Giffen could not believe it. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. "How high can you go?" he asked Flinty. "As high as I want to." Flinty floated up to the ceiling. Then he flew around the room just like a cloud. Giffen knew that he had to get the strap box flyer. It was worth a fortune. He could make a lot of money if he had it. "Why are you showing this to me?" Giffen asked Flinty. "Because you are a great inventor," said Flinty. "You have invented Giffen's great glue. I am an inventor too. I have invented the strap box flyer. We could be partners. You could help me make the strap box flyer, and I could help you make the glue." Giffen did not say anything. He was thinking. He wanted the strap box flyer, but he couldn't stay in Horsham. Once 4 hours was up, his glue would stop working. The things that people mended would start falling to bits. They would come looking for him. He could even end up in jail. "Have you got another strap box flyer?" Giffen asked. "Yes," said Flinty. "I have one more. You can try it out if you want to. But first, I have to assemble it. I will have to screw the strap onto the box." "Well, that'll take half an hour," said Giffen. "I'll go and get me truck. Then I'll be back to try out the strap box flyer myself." Giffen went off. He had decided to steal the strap box flyer. He wanted to have the truck nearby for a quick getaway. Giffen could not believe his luck. Once he had the strap box flyer, he would find out how it worked. Then he would make more of them. He could sell them for thousands of dollars each. He would make a fortune. Everyone would want one. He ran back to his truck. Then he drove to Flinty's house as fast as he could. The strap box flyer was ready. There would just be time for a quick tryout, and then he would have to leave town. Flinty put the strap box flyer onto Giffen's arm. "Now," he said, "all you have to do is to think of where you would like to fly." Giffen thought that he would like to fly over to his truck. It worked. He went gently flying through the air and landed on the roof of his truck. Flinty floated over and joined him. "Great," said Giffen. "Really great. How high can we go in these things?" "As high as you like," said Flinty. "As high as you like." Giffen forgot about everything except the strap box flyer. He forgot about the time. He forgot about Giffen's great glue. And he forgot about getting out of town quickly. "Let's go up to the clouds," he said to Flinty, and so they flew together, high into the sky. When they looked down, the people looked like tiny ants. It was wonderful to fly so high. Time passed quickly. Hours went by. It started to get dark. Giffen decided that he would wait until it was night. Then he would be able to get away from Flinty. He would just fly off and lose Flinty in the dark. Then he would drive off in his truck and never come back. He could take the strapbox flyer to bits and find out how it worked. Then he could make a lot more of them and sell them. Then he would be rich. Flinty flew over to Giffen. "Oh, we are very high," he said. "We can't go much higher than this. There will be no air to breathe." Giffen looked down. They were so high that he could not see the ground. They were above the clouds. "I have only made 2 strapbox flyers so far," said Flinty, "and yours is the best of the 2. "Why is that?" asked Giffen. "Because I joined it together with Giffen's great glue." Giffen was just in time to see his strapbox flyer break into bits. Then he started to fall. He screamed all the way down.
Skeleton on the Dunny. All right, so you want to hear the story of the ghost on the Dunny. Everybody wants to know about it, so I'm going to tell it for the last time. I'll put it on this tape recording. Someone else can write it down. My spelling's not too good. And anyway, I haven't got time for a lot of writing. Now, I'm giving you a warning. This is not a polite story. If your feelings get hurt, it'll be your own fault. I call a spade, and I call a dunny a dunny. Now, if you live in Australia, you know what a dunny is. It's a toilet, a lavatory. Other names for it are throne, loo, WC, jerry, and thunderbox. I've heard it called other things, but I won't mention them here. I'm not a rude person. I just get to the point. Now, some dunnies are outside. An outside dunny is usually at the bottom of the garden, a long way from the house. And if it rains, you get wet. If it's night time, you have to get a torch and go out there in the dark. And when you've finished, you have to pull a chain to make it flash. There's no buttons or anything flash like that. Anyway, I must get back to the story. It all started when I was 14 years old. My parents died in a car accident. I went to live with my auntie Flo. She lived in the country, at Timboon. I was pretty broken up. Miserable, in fact. One minute I was happy as Larry with a mother and a father living in a big house in the city. The next minute I was with Auntie Flo in the bush. Auntie Flo was nice. It wasn't her fault. I just felt low because of what happened. That sort of thing's very hard to take. My new home was very old. It was a big wooden house with a veranda all around it. It had a tin roof. You could hear the rain falling on it at night. Inside the house, it was very dark, gloomy. Every doorway had wooden beads hanging down on strings. There were old photos all over the walls, pictures of glum men staring down at you. In the hall was a tall clock, a grandfather clock. It ticked loudly. The house was so quiet you could hear the ticking in every room. For some reason, you always felt like whispering. It was like a library. School had finished. It was the holidays. There wasn't much to do. I didn't know anybody in the town, so most days I went hunting rabbits or snakes. Auntie Flo was very good to me. She liked me. "Bob," she would say, "you need fattening up." She made jam tarts and little cakes with icing and set them up on the table with these neat napkins. She was a very good cook and very old. She didn't know much about boys, so she let me go wherever I liked. She only had one rule: be home for tea on time. I liked Auntie Flo, but I didn't like her outside dunny. One day, Auntie Flo took me aside. She was waving a bit of paper and she looked very serious. "It's very sad about your parents, Bob," she said. "I am worried about your future. If I die, there will be no one to look after you." She was a good-hearted old girl. A tear ran down her face. Anyway, she said, I've made some plans. Now, this is my will. It tells what'll happen to my things if I die. I've left everything to you, and if I die, you'll get the lot, the house and my money. Well, I didn't know what to say. I looked at my shoes. She kept talking with tears in her eyes. The only thing you won't get is a painting I used to have. You can't have it because it's gone. Stolen. It was in my family for a long time. It was worth a lot of money, very valuable. It was a painting of this house, and I wanted you to have it. I pretended not to notice her tears. Who stole it, Auntie? I asked. I don't know, she answered. I went away to England for 2 years, and a man called Old Ned lived in the house and looked after everything for me. But when I came back, he was dead, and the painting was gone. I asked Auntie Flo how Ned died. I don't know, she said. I found him on the toilet at the bottom of the garden. He'd been there for a year. There wasn't much left of him, just a skeleton, sitting on the toilet. Oh, well, that was nice. That was very nice. Now I had to go and sit on an outside dunny where someone had died. Oh, I didn't like going to that loo at the best of times. You had to walk down a long path overgrown with weeds. Trees stuck out and scratched your face. When you got inside, it was very dark. There was no light globe. There were cobwebs and no toilet paper. Just a nail on the wall with newspaper hanging on it. It wasn't even worth reading the paper. It was only the Age. Very boring. Those cobwebs had me worried too. There could be spiders. Redback spiders. And redbacks are poisonous. I knew that song about redbacks on the toilet seat. It wasn't funny when your pants were down, I can tell you that. Redbacks, cobwebs, stories about skeletons and no one around. I didn't like sitting there with that door closed, especially at night. Oh, at night it was creepy. One day I was in the dunny paying a visit. There wasn't much to do. I started counting holes in the wall. A lot of knots had fallen out of the wood. They were little round holes that let in a bit of light. I'd counted up to hole number 20 when I saw something that made my hair stand on end. An eye was looking at me, staring at me through the hole. It was not just any old eye. I could see right through it. I could see the trees on the other side of it. It was not a human eye. I pulled up my pants so fast. No one's ever pulled up their pants that fast before. I ran up the path back to the house like greased lightning. I told Auntie Flo about it. She didn't believe me. Oh, rubbish, she said. There's nothing down there. It's just your imagination. You can imagine how I felt. Very nice. Oh, very nice indeed, I don't think. I was not going down there again. No way. Just think about how you'd feel at the bottom of the garden, in the dark, sitting on a dunny where someone had died. Not only died, but turned into a skeleton. Then there were cobwebs, redback spiders, and eyes. Eyes, looking at you through holes in the walls. I made up my mind. I wasn't going down there again, ever. I didn't go there for a week. Then I started feeling a bit crook. I felt terrible. You're not looking well, said Auntie Flo. You've not been regular, have you, dear? You better have some medicine. The medicine fixed me up all right. I got the runs. I spent most of the day sitting down there. But what I was really worried about were the nights. Sure enough, it happened. I had to go to the loo in the night. I took a torch and went down slowly down the dark path. The trees were rustling and something seemed to be moaning. I told myself it was a bird. I hoped it was a bird. It had to be a bird. At last, I reached the dunny. I went inside, shut the door and locked it. I'd no sooner sat down than something terrible happened. The torch slowly went out. The batteries were flat as a tack. Now, I think I should tell you what happens to me when I get scared. My teeth start to chatter. They go clickety-clack very loudly. So there I was, sitting in the dark with my teeth chattering. I tried to stop it, but I couldn't. You must have been able to hear the noise a mile away. I started to think about creepy things. Eyes, bats, vampires, murderers. I was scared to death. I wanted to get out of there. My teeth were chattering louder and louder. And then the moon came out, and moonbeams shone through the space on the top of the door. I felt a bit better, but only for a second. I looked up and my heart froze. A face was looking at me. An old man's face. He had a beard, and he was wearing an old hat. He just stood there staring at me over the top of the door. And even worse, well, much worse, the moon was like shining right through him. I could see all the way through him. He didn't block out the moonlight at all. I couldn't get out. The old man was on the other side of the door. I was trapped. I started screaming out, "Auntie Flo! Auntie Flo! Help! A ghost!" The face looked startled. Then it just disappeared. I didn't waste any time. I kicked open the door and ran out. I fell flat on my face. I'd forgotten to pull my pants up. When I finally pulled up my pants, the ghost had gone. I tore up the path, screaming out for Auntie Flo. Auntie Flo didn't believe me. She knew I was scared, but she didn't believe there was a ghost. "Nonsense," she said. "There's no such thing as ghosts. I've been going down there for 60 years and I've never seen one." I tried to make the best of it. I smiled. A weak smile, but a smile. Auntie Flo did not smile back. She was staring at me. Her mouth was hanging open. "Bob," she shouted. "Bob, one of your teeth is missing. One of your beautiful teeth." I put my hand up to my mouth. Sure enough, a front tooth was gone. Broken, clean off. I knew what had happened. My teeth had chattered so hard that the tooth had broken. That ghost had done it now. I was starting to get mad with that ghost. Auntie Flo was upset. "You must have done it when you fell over," she said. She put some new batteries in the torch, then we went out to look for the tooth. There was no sign of it. There was no sign of the ghost either. The next day we went to the dentist. He had bad news for me. "You'll have to have a plate," he said. "The tooth is gone, and the piece that's left is split." "What's a plate?" I asked. "Like false teeth," he told me. "But you'll only have one tooth that's false, and you'll have to look after it. They cost a lot of money, so don't lose it. Clean it every night and put it in water when you go to bed. And don't break it by biting string or hard objects." The plate cost $200. Can you believe that? $200? Auntie Flo had to pay up. It was a lot of money. She made sure I looked after that tooth. I had to clean it every night and every morning. She checked on it when I was in bed. Every night she looked at the tooth in the glass of water. And if the plate wasn't clean, she made me do it again. She wouldn't let me take it out of my mouth in the daytime. She thought I might lose it. That ghost had caused a lot of trouble. I'd lost a tooth. Auntie Flo had wasted $200. I didn't see the ghost for about a month. I stayed away from the bottom of the garden at night time. I only went in the day. He didn't come in the day anymore. All the same, I made my visits very, very short. I did a lot of thinking about that ghost. Who was he? Why was he hanging around a Dunny? I asked Auntie Flo about old Ned who had died down there. "Auntie Flo," I said one day, "you know that old man that lived here when you lost your painting? What did he look like?" She looked sadly at the place where a painting used to hang, and then she said, "He always wore an old hat, and he had a beard, a long grey beard." I knew at once that the ghost was old Ned. I felt a bit sorry for him. Fancy having your skeleton sitting on a dunny for a year. All the same, I wished he'd go away. I didn't want to see him again. But of course, I did. One night, I just had to go. You know what I mean. I got my torch out and I went into the dark, down to the bottom of the garden. I was scared, really scared. My teeth began to chatter again. They were really clacking. I was worried about my plate. With all the clacking, it might break. I took it out and held it in my hand. There I sat, tooth in hand and my real teeth chattering enough to wake up the dead. I left the dunny door open. If old Ned showed up, I wanted to get away quickly. I didn't want to be trapped. I did the job that I went for. Then I pulled up my pants, reached up, and pulled the chain. As I did, I could feel someone watching me. My hand started to shake, badly. The plate slipped out of my hand and into the dunny. In a flash, it was gone. Flushed down the loo. When I turned around, I saw old Ned standing there. I could see right through him, through his hat, through his beard, through his hands and his face. He looked very sad indeed. I didn't run.
I didn't feel quite so frightened now that I could see him properly. He was trying to say something. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out, and he was pointing to the roof of the Dunny. I looked up, and there was nothing to see, just a rusty old roof. "What do you want?" I heard myself say. "Why are you hanging around this loo all the time?" He couldn't hear me. He just kept pointing at the roof of the Dunny, and then he started to fade. He just started to fade away in front of my eyes. Then he was gone. Vanished. I walked slowly up the path. I wasn't scared anymore, not of the ghost. He looked harmless. But I was scared of something else. I was scared of what Auntie Flo was going to say when she found that my plate had gone. The next morning, I jumped out of bed early. I wrote a note for Auntie Flo. It said, "Auntie Flo, gone for a ride on my bike. I will be back for tea. Bob." So I set out to look for my tooth. I wanted to find it before Auntie Flo knew that it was gone. Now, I knew where the sewerage farm was. It was 20 miles away to the north. My tooth had gone north. It was a long way. The road was very dusty and hot. The paddocks were brown. All the cows were sitting under the trees in the shade. There was no shade for me, but I kept riding. By lunchtime, I could tell I was getting close to the sewerage farm. I could smell it. It was a bad smell. A terrible smell. As I rode closer, the smell got worse. At last, I reached the farm. It had a high wire fence around it, and inside were a lot of brown ponds. In the middle of the ponds was a hut. Inside the hut, I could see a man. He was writing at his desk. That man had the worst job in the world. He was sitting down working in the middle of a terrible stink, a shocking stink. He didn't seem to mind. I held my nose with one hand and knocked on the open door. "Come in," he said. "What can I do for you?" He was a little bald man with glasses. He looked friendly. He didn't seem to care that I was holding my nose. "Excuse me," I said. "Have you seen a plate? Has a plate come through the sewer?" It was hard to talk with my hand holding my nose. It sounded as if I had a cold. "A plate?" he said. "No, a plate could not fit through the pipes. It'd be too big." Not that sort of plate," I told him. "Not a dinner plate. A mouth plate? A plate with a tooth on it. Yeah, a false tooth." "Ah," he said and smiled. "Well, why didn't you say? False teeth? Oh, yes, we have false teeth." He went over to the wall, and there were a lot of baskets there. They all had labels. One said pens and pencils, another said watches. He brought over a basket and dumped it in front of me. It was full of false teeth. They were all dirty, and they were brown. The man gave me a pair of tongs, and I started to sort through them slowly. I felt a bit sick. I felt like throwing up. At last, I found a plate with only one tooth on it. My precious plate. It looked yucky. It was brown and slimy, and it stank. I thought of where it had been and where I found it. I didn't know if I could ever put it in my mouth again. I wrapped it up in my handkerchief and rode slowly home. When I reached home, I went up to the bathroom. I scrubbed the plate. I scrubbed it and scrubbed it. It got a lot cleaner, but it was still the wrong colour. The tooth was not white enough. Next, I boiled it in water, but it was still a bit grey. That was as clean as I could get it. I put it on the table and looked at it. I looked at it for a long time. Then I picked it up and closed my eyes and shoved it in my mouth very quickly. Old Ned had a lot to answer for. He had caused a lot of trouble. But all the same, I felt sorry for him. It couldn't be fun hanging around a toilet. I wondered why he was there and why he looked so sad. I decided that I would go and see him and have a talk. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I waited till Auntie Flo had gone to bed. Then I took out my torch and set out for the Dunny. It was very windy and wild. Clouds were blowing across the moon. The trees were all shaking. Leaves blew into my face. It seemed like a long way to the bottom of the garden. When I reached the Dunny, it was empty. There was no sign of old Ned. It was cold out in the wind, so I went inside and sat down. I waited for a long time. The wind started to get stronger. It blew the door shut with a bang, and then the moon went behind a cloud. It was very, very dark. The Dunny started to shake. The wind was screaming and howling. The wall started to lean over. The wind was blowing the dunny over with me in it. There was a loud crash and the whole thing collapsed. It fell right over on its side. Everything went black. When I woke up, the wind had stopped. My head hurt, but I was all right. No broken bones. Someone was bending over me. It was old Ned. He was just the same as before. I could see right through him, but he was smiling. He looked happy. He was pointing to the roof of the dunny. It was all smashed up, and so I went over and I had a look. Under a piece of tin was a picture frame. It was Auntie Flo's missing painting, the stolen painting. I picked up the painting, put it under my arm. Auntie Flo would be glad to get it back, very glad. I started to say thanks to Ned, but something was happening. He started to float up in the air. He was going straight up. He looked happy to be leaving the earth. He floated up towards the moon. He grew smaller and smaller. At last, I couldn't see him anymore. He was gone. And I knew he wouldn't be coming back. Auntie Flo was very pleased to get her painting back. She was so happy that she cried. She hung it on the wall in its old spot, and she kept looking at it all the time. I didn't tell her about old Ned. She wouldn't believe it anyway. But I think I know what happened. Old Ned stole the painting. He hid it in the dunny roof. When he died, he was in limbo. He was not in this world because he was dead. He could not go back to the next world because he had done something bad. So he had to hang around the outside loo, hoping that Auntie Flo would find her painting. Well, now that she'd got it back, he was free to go. When he floated off into the air, he was going to a happier place, well, wherever that is. Auntie Flo put in a new toilet, an inside one. It was all shiny and clean, a push-button job, no cobwebs, spiders or ghosts. Well, that's just about the end of the story. Oh, except for one thing. One day, I was looking at Auntie Flo's lost painting. It was a painting of her house in the old days, when it had just been built. It had no trees around it. Out the back, you could see the outside dunny, with the door open. I looked very closely at that dunny in the picture. Someone was sitting in it, sitting down. I went and got a magnifying glass and I looked again. It was old Ned, with his hat and his long beard. He looked happy. He had a smile on his face and one eye closed. He was winking at me.
Lucky Lips. Marcus felt silly, but he knocked on the door anyway. It was as silent as the grave. He noticed a movement behind the curtain. Someone was watching him. He could see a dark eye peering through a chink in the curtain. There was a rustling noise inside that sounded like rats' feet on a bare floor. The door slowly opened and Ma Scritchett's face appeared. It was true what people said. She looked like a witch. She had hair like straw and her nose was hooked and long. She smiled, showing pointed yellow teeth.
"Come in. I've been waiting for you."
Marcus wasn't going to let this old woman fool him. She was a faker, a phony. How could you be expecting me? No one knew I was coming here.
I knew you were coming, and I know what you want.
Marcus was determined not to be taken in. Okay, what do I want? Ma Scritchett puckered her wrinkled lips.
A kiss,
Marcus backed away toward the door. Thanks, but no thanks.
Not from me, you silly boy. A kiss from the girl of your dreams. You're 16 years old and you've never been kissed.
Marcus could feel his face turning red. She knew. She knew all about it. She must be able to read minds. The stories that were told about her must be true.
Come with me.
Ma Scritchett led Marcus along a dark, narrow passage and up some wooden stairs. The house was filled with junk. Broken TV sets and old bicycles, piles of books and empty bottles. The stair rails were covered in cobwebs. They went into a small room at the top of the house. Inside the room was a couch and a chair. Nothing else. No crystal ball on a round table, and no junk or equipment for telling fortunes. The room was almost bare. The old witch held out her hand.
This will cost you $20.
Marcus tried to keep his voice from shaking. I pay after, not before. This could be a trick.
You pay before, not after. I only help those who believe in me.
Marcus looked into her eyes. They were cold and hard. He took out his wallet and gave her $20. She tucked it inside her dress.
Lie down on the couch.
Marcus lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling. A tiny spider was spinning a web in the corner. Marcus wished he hadn't come. He wanted to go home. But there was something about Ma Scritchett that made you do what she told you to. The old woman hissed in his ear.
You've never kissed a girl. You've tried plenty of times, but they always turn you down. When you get home to their front door, they always say thank you and go inside. It's maddening, isn't it? It's enough to make you spit. Not one girl has ever given you a kiss.
Marcus just nodded his head because it was all true. Ma Scritchett smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a smile that made Marcus feel foolish. Without a word, the old woman put a gnarled hand into a string bag and pulled out a small tube.
Take this. It's just what you need.
It was a stick of lipstick in a small gold container. No way! I'm not wearing lipstick. You must think I'm crazy.
Sit down, boy, and listen to me. You put that on your lips and you'll get all the kisses you want. It's clear, so no one will be able to see it. But it'll do the trick. It'll work on any female. Just put some of that on your lips and the nearest girl will want to kiss you.
Marcus looked at the tube of lipstick. He didn't know whether to believe it or not. It might work. Old Ma Scritchett could read his mind.
The lipstick will work only once on each person. But don't worry, it will work. It'll work better than you think.
When Marcus got home, the whole thing seemed like a dream. He wondered whether his visit to Ma Scritchett had really happened. But he had the lipstick to prove that it had. He held it in his hand. It had a strange appearance, and he found that it glowed in the dark. He put it in a drawer and left it there. The following week, a new girl started at Marcus's school. Her name was Jill. Marcus didn't waste any time. He asked her out for a date on Friday night. They went to a disco, and it turned out to be a good night. For Jill, anyway. But as Marcus danced, he could feel the lipstick in his pocket. He couldn't forget about it. It annoyed him. It was like having a stone in his shoe. At 11 o'clock, they decided to go home. As they walked, Jill chatted happily. She seemed glad that she'd made a new friend so quickly. Marcus started to feel a bit guilty. He fingered the lipstick in his pocket. Should he use it? He remembered something about stolen kisses. Was he stealing a kiss if he used the lipstick? Not really. If it worked, Jill would be kissing him of her own free will. Anyway, it probably wouldn't work. Old Ma Scritchett had probably played a trick on him. But he'd never know, unless he tried it. He just had to know if that lipstick worked. As they went inside the front gate of Jill's house, Marcus pretended to bend down to do up his shoelace. He quickly pulled out the lipstick and smeared some on his lips. Then he stood up. His lips were tingling. He noticed that Jill was looking at him in a strange way. Her eyes were wide open and staring. Then she rushed forward, threw her arms around Marcus's neck and kissed him. Jill jumped back as if she'd been burnt. She put her hand up to her mouth and went red in the face. I'm sorry, Marcus. I don't know what came over me. What must you think of me? I've never done anything like that before. Marcus smiled. Oh, don't worry about it. That sort of thing happens to me all the time. The girls find me irresistible. Jill didn't know what to say. She was blushing. I'd better go in. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Then she turned round and rushed into the house. Marcus whistled to himself as he walked home. It works, he thought. The lipstick really works. He couldn't wait to try it on someone else. He decided to make the most popular girl in the school kiss him. Her name was Fay Billings. The trouble was, he knew she wouldn't go out on a date with him. Then he had a bright idea. He wouldn't even bother about a date. He'd just go round to Fay's house and ask to see her. He'd put the lipstick on before he arrived, and when she came to the door, she'd give him a big kiss. The news would soon get around, and the other kids would think that he had something good going. It'd make him popular with the girls. Marcus grinned. It was a great idea. He decided to put it into action straight away. He rode his bike around to Fay's house and leaned it against the fence. Then he took out the lipstick and put some on his lips. He walked up to the front door and rang the bell with a big smile on his face. The door opened, but it wasn't Fay standing there. It was Mrs. Billings. She was about 40. She had a towel wrapped round her head and she had dust on her face from the housework she'd been doing. When she saw Marcus, a strange look came over her face. Her eyes went large and round. They looked as if they were going to pop out. Her lips twitched. She trembled and then tottered forward, pulled by an unseen force. She threw her arms around Marcus's neck and kissed him on the mouth. Marcus struggled furiously. Imagine if someone saw him being kissed by a 40-year-old woman. Mrs. Billings suddenly stopped. Oh, my goodness, what am I doing? Kissing a perfect stranger. And you're so young. What's got into me? What would my husband think? Please excuse me. I must be ill. I think I'd better go in and have a little rest. Marcus rode home slowly. He was not pleased. This wasn't working out the way he wanted. He'd had the lipstick for 2 weeks now, and he'd only received one decent kiss. He decided to make Fay Billings kiss him at school, in front of all the other kids. All the girls would be chasing him after that. He'd be the most popular boy in the school. He sat next to Fay for the maths lesson next day. She looked at him with a funny expression on her face, but she didn't say anything. Miss White, their teacher, was late for the class. This was the chance that Marcus had been waiting for. He bent down under the desk and put on some of the lipstick. Then he sat up and looked at her. The lipstick worked. Fay's eyes went round, and she threw herself onto Marcus and kissed him. Then she jumped back and gave a little cry. Oh! Marcus looked round with a grin on his face. But it didn't last for long. All the girls' eyes were wide and staring.
He's mine, I saw him first!
Tissy came up and kissed him, and then Gerda and Helen and Betty and Maria. They climbed over each other in the rush to get to him. They shrieked and screamed and fought. They scratched and fought and bit. Marcus fell onto the floor under a struggling, squirming heap of girls. Oh, no, get off! Oh, please, please, no! No! When all the 16 girls in the class had kissed him, there was silence. They were in a state of shock. They just sat there looking at each other. Marcus had his tie ripped off and his shirt was torn. He had a cut lip and a black eye. Then Gerda yelled out, "I kissed Marcus! Oh, no! Oh, yuck!"
Terrible. Oh, I need a glass of water. Oh, I'm going to be sick.
All the girls started wiping their mouths as if they'd eaten something nasty. Then everybody started laughing. The boys laughed and the girls laughed. They staggered round holding their sides. Tears rolled down their faces. Everybody laughed except Marcus. He knew they were laughing at him, and he didn't think that it was funny. After all the kissing at school, everyone called Marcus Lucky Lips. He felt like a fool. He was worse off now than he'd been before. Marcus didn't use the lipstick again for a month. None of the girls would go out with him, and he wasn't going to risk wearing it just anywhere. Not after what happened at school that day. But he always carried the lipstick with him, just in case. The last time he used it was at the Royal Melbourne Show, where the class had been taken on an excursion. They had to collect material for an assignment. Marcus and Fay Billings and 2 other boys walked around together. The favourite spots were the sideshows. There were knock-em-downs and rides on the Mad Mouse. There was a fat lady and a mirror maze. There was a ghost train and dozens of other rides. One of the sideshows had a sign up saying, "Big Ben, the strongest man in the world." They all milled around looking at the tent. There was a pavilion full of live pigs nearby. "Let's go and see Big Ben. He fights people. Anyone who can beat him wins $1,000 and gets to kiss the Queen of the show." "That'd be just the thing for you, Lucky Lips," said Fay. Marcus went red in the face. "Oh, I can get a kiss from the Queen of the show easily. Just watch me." Marcus paid his $1 and went inside Big Ben's tent. Inside was a boxing ring. Big Ben was standing inside it waiting for someone to fight him and to try to win the $1,000 and a kiss from the Queen of the show. She sat on a high chair behind the ring. Marcus looked at her. She was beautiful. He wouldn't mind a kiss from her. Then he looked at Big Ben. He was the biggest man Marcus had ever seen. He had huge muscles and he was covered in tattoos. And he looked mean. Very mean. Marcus ducked round the ring to where the Queen of the show sat. He quickly put on some of the invisible lipstick. And at once, the beauty queen jumped off her chair and kissed Marcus. Everyone laughed, except Big Ben. He roared in fury.
Trying to steal a kiss without a fight, are you? I'll teach you a lesson, me boy.
Marcus tried to run away, but he wasn't quick enough. Big Ben grabbed him and lifted him high into the air. He walked out of the tent and carried Marcus over to one of the pig pens and threw him inside. Marcus crashed to the floor of the pen. He felt dizzy. The world seemed to be spinning round. He tried to stand up, but he couldn't. The floor was covered in foul-smelling muck. In the corner, Marcus could see the biggest pig that he'd ever seen. It was eating rotten vegetables and slops from a trough. It was dribbling and slobbering as it ate. Its teeth were green. He turned around and looked at Marcus. It was a sow. Marcus suddenly remembered something that Ma Scritchard had said about the lipstick.
It will work on any female.
Oh, no. No. No! Get me out!
Cow Dung Custard. A lot of kids have nicknames, like Mouse or Bluey or Freckles. Those sorts of nicknames are okay. Well, my nickname was the Cow Dung Kid. Can you imagine that? The Cow Dung Kid. What a name to get stuck with. It was all my father's fault, him and his vegetable garden. Now, don't get me wrong, though. Dad was a good bloke, a real good bloke. He brought me up all on his own. I didn't have a mother, so he can take all the credit for the way I turned out. Dad loves to grow vegetables. His vegetable garden is his pride and joy. Every year he went into competition. He always won lots of prizes for the best vegetables. He won prizes for the biggest pumpkins and the juiciest tomatoes. He grew the biggest veggies in the whole town. He once grew a pumpkin that was so big it took 4 men to lift it. His peas were as big as golf balls, and his beans, they were as long as your arm. No kidding. The whole yard was filled up with vegetables. He had long rows of them. Every row, right, had a little sign at the end. On each sign was the name of the vegetable that was growing and the batch number. This batch number told which type of manure he used. Batch 24 meant 3 shovels of cow dung and 1 shovel of horse droppings. Batch 14 was 2 shovels of horse droppings, 1 shovel of sheep droppings and 3 shovels of pig droppings. Dad had every type of manure you could think of. He had duck and goose, he had kangaroo and wombat, he had bat and emu, he even had snake droppings. And guess who had to help him collect it? You're not wrong. It was me. Every weekend I had to go and collect cow dung. Every weekend without fail. Now we lived right in the middle of town. I had to get a wheelbarrow and walk out to the country. Then I had to fill it up with cow dung, and it had to be fresh. Nice and sloppy, Dad would say. Make sure it's nice and sloppy. Then I had to walk back through the town with a wheelbarrow full of sloppy cow dung. I wasn't on my own, though. Oh, no. I had company. About 5,000 flies came with me. They were like a black cloud following me along the street. Everyone could see me. It felt like the whole town was watching me and my flies. I got the nickname of the Cow Dung Kid on one of those trips. It was on Christmas Day. Dad's boss at work grew vegetables too, but they were never as good as Dad's. He didn't have a son to go and get manure. So Dad had a bright idea. He decided to give the boss a surprise, a Christmas present. He wanted me to go and get the manure for his boss. Now, just tip it out and leave it for him to find, said Dad. He'll be tickled pink. I might even get a raise out of this. Oh, but Dad, I pleaded, not on Christmas Day. Everyone will be looking. I can't do it. I just can't. He gave me one of his sorrowful looks. He shook his head and said, after all I've done for you, Greg, and you won't even help me out with one little thing. I gave in and went. I didn't want to spend all Christmas feeling guilty. I set off at the crack of dawn. I didn't even open my presents. I wanted to get it over and done with before people were out of bed. But it was no use. All the kids in town were up early. They followed me and my cow dung along the street. They were all on new bikes and scooters that they'd got for Christmas. They thought it was a great joke. Oh, look what Santa brought Craig, shouted some bright spark. Everyone laughed. As I went along, more and more kids started following me. After a while, there was about 50 of them. Someone yelled out, "King of the Flies! Greg is King of the Flies!" "The Cow Dung Kid," said another voice. Another laugh went up. They all started yelling it out. "Cow Dung Kid! Cow Dung Kid!" Oh, it was embarrassing, I can tell you that. So I ran faster and faster. Some of the cow dung fell out, but I didn't care. I just kept running. At last I reached the boss's house. I tipped out the cow dung on his doorstep right against the door. That way he'd get a surprise when he opened the door, and Dad would get all the glory. Anyway, that's how I got the name the Cow Dung Kid. And after all of that, Dad's boss wasn't even grateful. He said something about cow dung all over his carpet. There's just no understanding some people. He didn't even say thanks. Flies, flies and flies. They hung around our house all day and all night. It was the smell of the manure. The smell attracted them. There were flies everywhere. They came down the chimney and under the doors. People had no trouble finding our house. If anyone asked where we lived, they were always told the same thing. Just stop at the house with the flies. The neighbours didn't like the flies. They were always going crook. So Dad gave them vegetables to keep them quiet. He gave them giant carrots and potatoes. They liked them so much that they only complained about the really bad days. This usually happened when Dad made a very smelly batch, like batch 72. Dad kept each batch of manure in a large rubbish bin. He had at least 200 of them in the backyard. The worse they smelled, the more flies hung around them. The ones with a really bad smell were kept down near the back fence, away from the house. Mr. Farley lived in the house at the back. He didn't like us much. He never spoke to us. He was a pretty crabby bloke. I could never figure out why. The trouble all started with batch 72. It was the strongest batch that Dad had ever made. It had bat droppings, rabbit droppings, and wombat droppings. There was also a bit of lizard and potteroo. But the main ingredient was cow dung. Dad also threw in some rotten pumpkins. They were bright yellow. He added water and he stirred the mix up, and it all went smooth and yellow. It's like custard, I said. Cow dung custard. It was a smelly batch, very smelly. It was the worst one that Dad had made. Good, said Dad. The more it smells, the better it works. I'll grow some great potatoes with this batch. He took out a pen and wrote Cow Dung Custard on the side of the bin. The flies were already starting to gather, so I decided to go inside and get out of the way. Oh, the smell was bad, and it was getting worse. I could smell batch 72 as I went to bed. Even though it was at the bottom of the yard, I knew there was going to be trouble with the neighbours over this. Batch 72 looked like custard, but it sure didn't smell like it. The next morning, I woke early. I knew that something was wrong. I could hardly breathe and I felt sick. It was the smell of the cow dung custard. It was the most terrible smell I'd ever come across. It was so bad you could almost see it. Every breath was painful. I put a handkerchief over my mouth and rushed to the window. All of the neighbours were up. They were outside our house. Nobody could sleep. They were all dressed in their pyjamas and they were all holding handkerchiefs over their noses. Some of them were making groaning noises. They were trying to shout. Some people were waving their fists at the house and they were all mad at us. I went and woke Dad up. He has a poor sense of smell. He was the only person in the street who was still asleep. He looked out the window. Amazing, he said. Amazing. Look at that. There's not one fly to be seen. He didn't even notice the people. He was looking for flies. I couldn't believe it. But what he said was true. There were no flies hanging around. They were all dead. The ground was covered in dead flies. They were like black carpet all over the lawn. The smell was so bad that it had killed all of the flies. Oh, you'd better do something, I told him. That stuff might be dangerous and everyone's mad at us. The neighbours are all angry. He looked out of the window. Everyone was running away. The smell was so awful they couldn't stand it. You're right, said Dad. You stay here. I'll go and see what I can do. So he walked down to the bottom of the yard. I could hear the bodies of dead flies crunching under his feet. I was glad he told me to stay inside. I think I would have fainted if I'd gone any closer to that smell. It was lucky for Dad that he couldn't smell very well. Now I watched him out of the window. He drove our old truck into the backyard. He tried to lift the cow dung custard onto it, but it was too heavy. He had to tip it out into a lot of buckets. And then he lifted them up onto the truck, and after he'd put all the buckets onto the truck, he came back to the house. He had yellow stuff all over his dressing gown. Oh, don't come in, I shouted. Please, don't come in. He yelled at me through the window. "I'm going down to the sea with it. I can't think of anywhere else to put it, so you stay here, Greg." He needn't have worried. There was no way I was going anywhere near that cow dung custard. Then I noticed something terrible. Dad's hair had fallen out. He was completely bald. He did not have one hair left on his head. Even his eyebrows had fallen out. That cow dung custard was strong, too strong. Dad jumped into the truck and he drove out the front gate. I watched him drive down the road. There wasn't a person inside. They were all inside with their heads under their pillows. As he went by, the dogs in the street ran off, yelping with their tails between their legs. Dad tipped the cow dung custard over a cliff and into the sea. For the next 2 weeks, there were dead fish floating around everywhere. The town we lived in is called Lake's Entrance. It's a fishing town. All the fishermen were cross with Dad for killing the fish. People in the street were mad at him too. The smell hung around for weeks. Dad took a lot of vegetables around to them, trying to make it up. Mr. Jackson, he lived next door. He told Dad to go away. "I don't want your vegetables," he said, "and I don't want your manure or your smells. Why don't you go and live on a farm? Then you can be as smelly as you want." Well, he had a point. I was getting sick of it too. The kids at school called me the cow dung kid. Everyone knew us and where we lived. All the houses in the street had for sale notices in the front yard. No one wanted to live near us. I didn't blame them. "Listen, Dad," I said, "let's go and live somewhere else, on a farm. Then I won't have to go and get manure and you'll have all you want. And there won't be any neighbours to complain." Well, Dad looked sad. He nodded, his bald head. "I'd like to move to a farm, Greg, but, well, we can't afford it. Farms cost a lot of money and we are broke. We'll have to stay here. But I will do one thing for you. I'll get rid of the smell. I'll find a way to stop the manure smelling. It'll be called Batch 100. Batch 100 will have no smell. And that's the only one I will use." I went off shaking my head. Poor old Dad. He meant well, but I knew he couldn't do it. How could anyone make up a batch of manure that didn't smell? Dad tried everything he could think of to make Batch 100. He put in flowers, he put in soap, he put in perfume. But he just couldn't stop the manure smelling. Our house was as smelly as ever. Even the school bus wouldn't come down our street anymore. One good thing did happen. Dad's hair started growing back. It was as thick and black as it had always been. Then one day, he did it. He made Batch 100. You couldn't smell a thing. It wasn't like the cow dung custard. You didn't even know it was there. I was rapt. I thought our problems were over. But I was wrong. Batch 100 had other problems. It was the worst one ever. People couldn't smell Batch 100, but the flies could. Flies can smell better than people can. It's something like a dog whistle. Dogs can hear them and people can't. Well, flies could smell Batch 100 when people couldn't. The flies came in their thousands, in their millions. The air was thick with them. The sound of their buzzing was terrible to hear. They crawled all over your face, into your nose and your ears. They were so thick, you couldn't see the sun after a while. It started to grow dark, and it was only lunchtime. Dad and I were in the backyard. After a while, we couldn't see the house or the back fence. The flies were just too thick. I'd never seen anything like it before. There were so many flies in the air that I couldn't find Dad. "Greg," he shouted, "go back to the house, quickly, this is dangerous." I couldn't see where he was. I couldn't see where anything was. I looked down at the ground. There were so many flies in the air, I couldn't see my feet. I had to squint to stop them getting into my eyes. I started to walk slowly where I thought the house was. I bumped into something large. It was the truck. Well, I could tell what it was by the feel of it. I was going the wrong way. I turned round and tried a different direction. Then I heard Dad's voice. I could just make it out over the buzzing of the flies. "Greg, this way," he called. I followed the sound of his voice. I walked very slowly to make sure I didn't bump into anything, and at last I reached Dad. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. He was standing on the doorstep. "Get ready," he shouted. "I'm going to open the door, and when I say go, rush in as quickly as you can, and I'll slam the door after us." "Go," he yelled. We both fell into the room. I couldn't see anything, but I heard the door shut with a bang. "Put the light on," said Dad. I switched on the light and the room was full of flies, but it wasn't as bad as outside. At least we could see. I looked at the window and it was black. Millions of flies were crawling all over it. "Quick," said Dad. "Block up all the cracks under the doors and I'll cover the chimney. We've got to stop them coming in." So I started stuffing towels and rags under the door. Dad covered up the fireplace with a piece of cardboard, and when we had all the cracks blocked up, he found some fly spray. We had plenty of fly spray in the house. It was something we used a lot of. It took 3 cans to kill them all. We ran upstairs to look out the top windows. They were all black too. We couldn't see outside at all. We were trapped in our own house by millions and millions of flies. Dad was upset. "Oh, this is bad, Greg," he said. "Very bad. Batch 100 is much too strong. Every fly in the country must be here, and it's all my fault. We've got to get rid of those flies." Just then, the phone rang. Dad picked it up. It was Mr. Jackson. He was shouting. I could hear every word, even though the flies were making such a loud noise outside. "You've done it this time, Moffat," he yelled. "The whole town is blacked out with flies. Nobody can get out of their house. It's pitch black in the middle of the day. And it's all your fault and your manure. You better do something, and quick. You brought the flies here. Now get rid of them." The phone went dead. He had hung up. "What can we do?" said Dad. "How can we get rid of them?" He hung his head in his hands. Oh, the poor bloke. I really felt sorry for him. We both sat there, thinking. Outside, the flies were getting thicker and thicker. "Fly spray," I said. "No good," he told me. "There isn't enough fly spray in the world to kill this lot. We need something stronger, something really powerful." We sat there, looking at each other, and we both thought of the answer at the same time. "Cow dung custard," we shouted together. "That's it," said Dad. "The smell is so strong that it kills flies. I'll mix up a special batch." "But what about the smell, Dad?" I asked. "We can't help the smell. This is an emergency. The whole town is blacked out with flies. We have to do something." "But how can we make it?" I asked him. "Well, you can't see a thing out there. You can hardly breathe. The flies get into your nose and your mouth. You won't be able to make the cow dung custard. It's as black as pitch." We both fell silent again. We just sat and looked at each other. Then Dad had an idea. "The beekeeper's outfit," he yelled. "I can wear the beekeeper's outfit." Once Dad used to keep bees. He still had the outfit for smoking out the bees. He had a hat and a net to stop the bees from stinging him. "Well, what about me? You can't do it on your own." "You'll have to make a heck of a lot. I'll have to come too." "Your wetsuit. You can wear your wetsuit. And put on the goggles. You can wear the snorkel to stop the flies getting into your mouth." We dressed up in our outfits. Dad had his hat and his bee net. I had my wetsuit, goggles and a snorkel. I felt silly, but as Dad said, this was an emergency. We tied a rope to each other so that we didn't become lost. Then we walked to the door and opened it. 1,000,000 flies poured into the room. Everything went black. The light was on, but we couldn't even see it. I felt a pull on the rope. Dad was moving out into the backyard. I couldn't see him, so I just followed the rope, and the flies swirled around us in one huge black cloud. Now we walked slowly. We didn't want to fall over, and at last we reached the back fence. Now I felt Dad's hand on my arm. He was shouting at me, but it was difficult to hear him because of the loud buzzing of the flies. "Help me tip the batch 100 over," he yelled. "Then we'll empty another 15 bins. We'll need at least 16 bins of cow dung custard to kill all these flies. They must be covering the whole town." Now we struggled over to batch 100. The flies were all trying to get to it. They were so thick that it was like walking through a river. I plunged my arm through the sea of flies and pushed over the bin. 1,000,000,000 flies rose into the air as it tipped over. The buzz was so loud it hurt my ears, and the wind from their wings, it blew me over. We stood up and felt our way to the other bins. It took a long time to push them all over and empty out the manure. In the end, we had 16 empty bins. I felt Dad's hand on my arm. "All right, we'll have to untie the rope," he shouted. "It'll take a long time to mix up 16 bins of cow dung custard. We have to hurry. The flies are getting thicker. Now every fly in Australia will be here soon." "Oh, I'm scared, Dad," I told him. "Well, I might get lost if you untie the rope." "Just feel your way along the fence," he said. "When you get to the manure heap, try to fill up the wheelbarrow with the cow dung. Put 10 shovels full into each bin, and I'll put the rest of the mixture in." His voice was shaking. I knew he was scared too, so I undid the rope and followed the fence to the manure heap. It took a long time, but at least I managed to put the cow dung in every bin. The flies kept bumping into my goggles. It felt as if someone was throwing rice at me. Every now and then I bumped into Dad. He was tipping all sorts of things into the bins. Once he dropped a rotten pumpkin onto my foot. Then something wonderful happened. A shocking stink filled the air. It was the first batch of cow dung custard. "Hooray!" I shouted. I was really happy, even though the smell was so bad. I didn't know whether it was working. I couldn't tell if it was killing the flies or not. There seemed to be just as many as ever. Dad came over to me. "Go back to the house," he yelled. "If this works, there are going to be dead flies everywhere. You might get buried if you stay here." "No way," I told him. "I'm staying with you." After a while, we had 2 bins of cow dung custard mixed up. Oh, the stink grew stronger and stronger. I felt ill, but I had to keep going. We made 1 bit at a time. Now, by the time we had made 10 bins, the smell was so strong we had to stop. "We can't go on," said Dad. "I'm going to faint if I don't get away from this smell." "Hey," I suddenly shouted, "I can see you." I could just make out the shape of Dad in his bee net. Oh, there were not so many flies in the air. The cow dung custard was working. It was killing some of the flies. I looked at the ground. It was covered in flies. Some of them were dead, but some of them were lying on their backs, kicking their legs in the air. There was a thick carpet of flies all over the lawn. Then I felt my head. My hair was full of dead flies. Oh, they were starting to fall down out of the sky. It was raining flies. "Quick," said Dad, "back to the house. We'll be buried alive if we don't hurry." So we ran back to the house. Flies were pouring down all around us. The dead bodies were so deep that we couldn't move properly. They came up to my ankles, and then up to my knees. And Dad reached the door first. He pushed it open and just fell inside. "Help!" I screamed. "I'm stuck." The flies were up to my armpits, and they were still falling. I was scared out of my wits. I didn't want to drown in a sea of flies. I couldn't move backwards or forwards. Dad still had the rope tied around his waist. He started to undo it. "Oh, quick, I'm going under," I yelled. The flies were getting deeper and deeper. They were nearly up to my mouth. He threw the rope over and I grabbed the end of it. But it was too late. The dead flies were right over my head. I was buried under the bodies of the flies. It was lucky that I had the goggles and snorkel on. The snorkel poked above the pile of flies. It enabled me to breathe, but I couldn't see a thing. Everything was black. And then I felt strong hands pulling me up. It was Dad. He'd followed the rope. He'd dug down to me. He dragged me across the top of the flies and into the house. Then he slammed the door. Oh, it was much better in the house. The flies were only knee-deep. At least we could walk around. So we went upstairs quickly as we could and we looked out of the window. It was still raining flies, but it was starting to ease off. At last, it stopped. Every fly was dead. The cow dung custard had killed the lot. Oh, the smell of it was terrible. Our place was on the top of a hill, and we could see the whole town. Every house was covered in dead flies. They covered the roads and the cars, the trees and the gardens. It looked just like a snow-covered village, but with black snow. There wasn't a person in sight. Everyone was trapped in their houses. The whole town was silent. And over it all hung the terrible smell of cow dung custard. Dad looked at me. "Good grief, Greg," he said. "All of your hair is gone." I felt the top of my head. It was smooth. I was as bald as a badger. Oh, I rushed to the mirror. "Oh, no," I groaned. "Not that. Oh, not bald." Then I looked at Dad. He was bald again too. All of his new hair had fallen out. "It's the cow dung custard," I said. "It's so strong that it makes your hair fall out." I looked out of the window again. It was still very quiet, but 4 or 5 people were out. They were trying to clear the flies away from their front doors. It was hard work. They were up to their armpits in flies. And I looked at them more closely. There was something strange about them, but I couldn't work out what it was. Then I got a shock. They were all bald. Oh, I knew there was going to be big trouble over this. A bit later, we heard the sound of a motor. It sounded like a tractor, but it wasn't. It was a bulldozer. It was clearing the streets. It pushed the flies to the side of the road, huge banks. Behind the bulldozer was a police car. They came slowly up our street. People were following them, lots of bald people, men, women, children. Oh, they were angry. They were mad. They were yelling and screaming at us. The bulldozer stopped at our house. It turned around and came through our garden. It cleared a path up to the front door, and then it stopped. A bald policeman stepped down from it. He had a handkerchief tied around his nose to stop the smell. He came into the house without knocking. "Quick," he said, "get into the police car. I'll have to get you out of here before the mob get you. I don't know what they'll do to you if they get their hands on you. They might tear you to pieces." Oh, he was worried, very worried. So was I. He pushed us into the car and started driving down the street. Crowds of bald people surrounded the car. They threw things at the car and tried to open the doors. They wanted to pull us out. Some even threw handfuls of flies at the car. I could see why they were mad. Everyone was bald, even the cats and the dogs. Not one person in the town had hair left anymore on their body. In the end, the police got us safely through the town. They took us to Melbourne, which was a long way away. Then they let us go. Well, Dad and I were both upset. We knew one thing for sure. We'd never go back to Lake's Entrance again. There was a big fuss about the whole thing. It was in all the papers and on the TV. Dad and I changed our names so that nobody could find us. Then it all died down and people started to forget about it. There was a shortage of wigs in Australia for a while, but after a couple of months, everybody's hair grew back. As time passed, people started to think that, well, it was funny. Now I'm writing this next to the swimming pool on our farm. Dad's out the front cleaning our Rolls Royce. Things worked out quite well for us in the end. Dad made a lot of money out of an invention. It's yellow stuff for getting rid of hair. People buy it in tubes and they put it on their legs. It works really well and it smells lovely. It's called CDC Hair Remover. Everybody likes it. Well, they think it's wonderful. But nobody knows what the CDC stands for.
Lighthouse Blues. Someone was playing music in the middle of the night. It sounded like a clarinet. I could only hear it when the wind dropped, but there was no mistake about it. I shivered, even though I was snug in bed. I wasn't cold, I was scared. Stan and I were the only people on the island, and he was in bed in the next room. So who was playing the music? It was cold outside and a storm was brewing up. I could hear the sea pounding against the cliffs. I got out of bed and looked out of the window. All I could see was the black clouds racing across the moon and the light from the lighthouse stabbing into the night. The music seemed to be coming from the lighthouse. I thought about waking Stan up, but I decided not to. He was the lighthouse keeper. He was a nice old boy, but I didn't want him to think I was scared. I was hoping to get a job as a lighthouse keeper myself one day. This was my first night on the island, and I wanted to make a good impression. I climbed back into bed and closed my eyes. I tried not to listen to the music. It was soft and far away, but it crept into my brain. It was like a soft voice calling to me. It was saying something. It was speaking without words. Somehow I knew that the music was meant for me. But who was playing? And why did it make me feel so sad? It was so sad I felt like crying, but I didn't know why. After a long time, I fell asleep with the music still sounding in my ears. The next morning at breakfast, I asked Stan if he'd heard anything.
No, Anton, I didn't hear anything. I never do. But I know there's something there. Visitors to the island always hear it. Most people can't stand it. They get scared and leave. You're the third helper that I've had here this year.
Well, who could be playing the music? And why can't you hear it? I asked him. Stan looked at me for a long time. He looked straight into my eyes, as if he was trying to see what I was thinking.
Put on your coat, boy, and come with me.
A strong wind was blowing. Stan took me along a track which ran along the top of the rocky cliffs. At last we came to a grave. Its headstone was facing out to sea. It was a lonely, windswept spot high on the cliff. Alan Rickard, 1915 to 1960. Lighthouse keeper from 1950 to 1960. R.I.P. Stan pointed to the grave.
Alan Rickard was my father.
The gravestone had a small drawing in the corner of a clarinet.
All the Rickards are musical, said Stan. My father played the clarinet, and I play the saxophone.
Stan and I walked slowly back to the house. The wind was blowing strongly. It flattened the grass and made my hair whip into my eyes. Stan had to shout so that I could hear.
I can't play any more, though. My fingers won't work properly. I have arthritis. My saxophone is in the music room at the top of the lighthouse. My father and I used to play up there when he was alive, but I don't go in there anymore. I can't bear to.
Stan's eye was wet. Perhaps the wind was doing it. Or was he crying? We walked back to the house. I didn't know what to think. Did the grave have anything to do with that sad music? The next day was Thursday. I told Stan I was going for a walk to look around the island, but instead I went to the lighthouse. I pushed open the door at the bottom and went in. It was gloomy inside. I went slowly up the stairs, around and around. It was as quiet as a grave. At last I reached the top. There were 2 doors. One led into the light, and the other was the door of the music room. I tried the handle. It was stiff, but it opened, and I stepped inside. There was a music stand and a small table. On the table was a clarinet and a saxophone. I looked at them. They were covered in dust. Neither of these instruments could have been playing on Friday night. There was something creepy about this room, so I decided to leave. Over the next few months, I was kept very busy on the island. I had to measure the rainfall and record the weather. I had to man the radio and listen for ships that were in trouble. And every night at 5 o'clock, I had to climb the stairs of the lighthouse and start up the light. I didn't go into the music room. and I didn't say anything to Stan about the music. But every Friday at about midnight, the music would start. Such sad, haunting music. I wondered who was playing and why. The next Friday, I waited until Stan was in bed asleep, and then I crept out of the house and into the dark night. It was cold and windy. The moon was hidden behind black clouds. Spray was blowing up from the sea, and the waves were crashing and sucking beneath the cliffs. In the distance, I could hear music. At last, I reached the lighthouse door. It was dark inside, and the music was floating down from above. I was scared. Even though I didn't want to go up, I forced myself to. My knees were knocking together as I climbed the dark stairs. I went round and around. Music echoed. It seemed to be laughing at me. "You won't get rid of me," I said aloud. "You won't scare me off like the others." I tried to sound tough, but I didn't feel tough. I forced my legs to take me all the way up to the music room. That's where the music was coming from. There was light coming from under the door. The music was very loud, but I was too scared to go in. And then the door started to open on its own. It just slowly opened. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I started to shake all over. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The clarinet was playing itself. It was floating in mid-air. Someone or something was playing it, but whoever it was invisible. I was really scared. I decided to get out of there. Then I thought about the other two boys who'd left the island. I wasn't going to be scared off like them. No fear. No ghost was going to chase me away. I took a step forward, but as soon as I entered the room, the music stopped. The clarinet floated through the air and landed on the table. Everything was quiet. I went over to the table and picked it up. The clarinet was covered in cobwebs. It looked as if it hadn't been played for years. But something had been blowing that clarinet only moments before. A ghost. It had to be a ghost. A ghost of Alan Rickard, Stan's father. But why was he so unhappy? And why did he want to scare away everyone who came to the island? I started to shiver. I felt as if cold, cold hands were touching me. Cold hands from the grave. I let out a scream and ran for my life. When I got back to the house, Stan was sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He looked up at me as I came in. "I've just had a radio message. They're going to pull down the lighthouse. They say they'll be here next Friday to put in an automatic one that doesn't need a keeper." My mouth fell open. Stan would be out of a job, and so would I. "My father died here. I wanted to spend my last days here too. Now I'll have to go and live on the mainland. They'll probably put me in an old folks' home." Suddenly I had an idea. "Wait a minute, don't give up yet, Stan. We're not the only ones on this island, you know. We can get some help. We have to put up a fight to save the lighthouse." Stan looked up at me sadly. He didn't know what I was talking about. I knew why the music was playing. The ghost lived in the lighthouse. He didn't want it to be knocked down either, so he played spooky music every time a stranger came to the island to scare them off. He wasn't worried about Stan. Stan was his son, and he loved the island and the lighthouse too. That's why Stan never heard the music. But playing music on Friday nights wouldn't work. Not against the wreckers. They were going to be here in the daytime. I had to talk to the ghost. I ran out of the house and up to the music room. "Listen, mate, I know you're here. Show yourself. I'm your friend, and I want to save the lighthouse too, but I need your help." Nothing happened. There was dead silence. I started to get angry. "You stupid ghost! Don't you know this place is going to be knocked down? The wreckers are coming on Friday. We've got to stop them. Stan and I need your help. Playing music on Friday nights won't stop them. We have to think of something else." Silence. If the ghost was there, he wasn't saying anything. Then I noticed something. Drops of water were slowly dribbling through the air. They looked like raindrops running down a piece of glass. But there was no glass there. At first I felt frightened, and then I realised what they were. They were tears. Teardrops running down an invisible face. The ghost was crying. "Look," I said, "I can't see you and I can't hear you. If you want to help, pick up the musical instrument." Very slowly, the clarinet started to rise in the air. As it did so, the dust and cobwebs disappeared. It was sparkling like new. "We need you to scare the wreckers off," I said. "You'll have to come outside to do that, in broad daylight." The music stopped. The clarinet started waggling from side to side. The ghost didn't want to go outside. "It's no good doing that," I said. "If you want to save the lighthouse, you've got to come outside." I walked out of the room and started going down the stairs. Halfway down, I looked over my shoulder. The clarinet was slowly floating down behind me. It was bobbing up and down as it went. "Hang on to that clarinet," I told the ghost. "It's the only way I know where you are." When we got to the bottom, I looked outside. The wind was blowing a little bit. It wasn't very strong, only a breeze. The clarinet slowly floated outside. And something terrible happened. It started to drift off. The breeze was blowing the ghost toward the edge of the cliff. I ran over and tried to grab the clarinet, but my fingers went right through it. It wasn't solid. When the ghost touched the clarinet, it changed. It became ghostly, and there was nothing I could do to help. The ghost drifted closer and closer to the edge of the cliff. Then the clarinet fell to the ground and started to move along in little jumps. I knew what was happening. The ghost was crawling. He was using the grass to drag himself back. It took a long time, but at last he reached the lighthouse and went inside. I tried to follow him, but the door slammed in my face. The ghost was mad at me, and I didn't blame it. After all, I'd nearly got it killed, if you know what I mean. I told Stan about what had happened. "Yes," he said, "I knew something was up there. I thought it might be my dear old dad, but I didn't really know. I've never heard it myself." I went up to the music room every day that week. I begged and I pleaded. But nothing happened. The room was cold and empty. At last Friday came. A ship arrived at first light. It unloaded 3 men and a bulldozer. The men set up camp down by the beach. Stan and I watched them from the house. "I'm going down to see them," said Stan. I watched him walk down to the beach. He was bent over and he walked slowly. His white beard flapped in the wind. A strong southwesterly was blowing. I saw him talking to the men. He was pointing to the lighthouse and shaking his head. One of the men started waving his fists. I could see they were shouting at each other. Stan turned round and came back to the house. "It's no use," he said. "They won't listen. They've given us until lunchtime to get all our things out of the lighthouse, and they're going to knock it down. The only thing I want is my saxophone. Not that I can play it any more, not with these old hands. Go and get it for me, will you, boy?" I went up to the music room and picked up Stan's old saxophone. I decided to leave the clarinet. That belonged to the ghost. After lunch, the bulldozer started up toward the lighthouse. There was a very narrow path where the track went close to the edge of the cliff. Stan and I sat down on the track. We held hands and waited. It didn't take long for the bulldozer to reach us. Its big steel blade stopped just in front of our faces. The driver got down. "Get out of the way or I'll squash you flat." "No," said Stan. "We're not moving." I looked up at the driver. He was an ugly-looking brute and he was big, very big. He picked Stan up with one hand and threw him out of the way. Stan landed on the ground with a thump. He didn't move. "Leave him alone! He's an old man! Leave him alone!" The driver gave an ugly grin. "Now it's your turn." But then I noticed something. The wind had stopped blowing. It was very still. I listened carefully. Yes, I could hear music. The door of the lighthouse opened and out came the clarinet. The driver of the bulldozer couldn't believe what he was seeing. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. A clarinet was floating through the air and playing a tune. He jumped off the dozer and ran down the track. He was screaming his head off. "Ah! Oh, no! The clarinet floated over to the bulldozer and hovered above the seat. The bulldozer started moving backwards toward the sea. The ghost had put it into reverse gear. It rumbled slowly toward the cliff, and then it tumbled over. At the last moment, the ghost jumped clear and came floating back toward the other two men. "Help! Help! No! No! Oh, no! Help! Oh, oh!" And that was the last I saw of them. I looked round for Stan. He was lying still on the grass. I knew he was dead. I looked at the grey sea. The wind was blowing the spray high into the air. "The wind! Quick!" I yelled. "Back to the lighthouse! The wind's getting up!" But I was too late. A sudden gust of wind blew the ghost over the edge and out to sea. I watched as the clarinet drifted away, getting smaller and smaller until it was gone. Well, that's just about the end of the story. Stan was buried next to his father. The wreckers didn't come back. Their union said that the men would never work on the island again because it was too dangerous. I was made lighthouse keeper. I love the island, but it gets very lonely. I often wish that Stan was still alive. Last night something happened. Something good. It was Friday. I was just closing my eyes when I thought I heard music. I jumped out of bed and ran to the lighthouse as fast as I could. I stopped when I reached the music room. Something was different. I pushed open the door a tiny bit and peeped in. The clarinet was floating in the air as usual. But there was another instrument as well. It was the saxophone. It looked as if it was playing itself. But I knew that Stan was playing it. There were 2 ghosts now.
Smart ice cream. Well, I came top of the class again. 100 out of 100 for maths, and 100 out of 100 for English. I'm just a natural brain, the best there is. There isn't one kid in the class who can come near me. Next to me, they're all dumb. Even when I was a baby, I was smart. The day that I was born, my mother started tickling me. "Bub, bub, bub," she said. "Cut it out, Mum," I told her. "That tickles." She nearly fell out of bed when I said that. I was very advanced for my age. Every year, I win a lot of prizes. Top of the class, top of the school, stuff like that. I won a prize for spelling when I was only 3 years old. I am a terrific speller. If you can say it, I can spell it. Nobody can trick me on spelling. I can spell every word there is. Some kids don't like me. I know that for a fact. They say I'm a show-off. Well, I don't care. They're just jealous because they're not as clever as me. I'm good-looking too, and that's another reason why they're jealous. Last week, something bad happened. Another kid got 100 out of 100 for maths too. That never happened before. No one has ever done as well as me. I'm always first on my own. A kid called Jerome Dadian beat me. He must have cheated. I was sure he cheated. It had something to do with that ice cream. I was sure of it. I decided to find out what was going on. I wasn't going to let anyone pull a fast one on me. It all started with the ice cream man, Mr. Peppy. The old fool had a van which he parked outside the school. He sold ice cream, all different types. He had every flavour there is, and some that I had never heard of before. He didn't like me very much. He told me off once. "Go to the back of the queue," he said. "You pushed in." "Mind your own business, Pop," I told him. "Just hand over the ice cream." "And Noah," he said, "I won't serve you unless you go to the back." I went round to the back of the van, but I didn't get in the queue. I took out a nail and made a long scratch on his rotten old van. He had just had it painted. Peppy came and had a look. Tears came into his eyes. "You are a bad boy," he said. "One day you will get into trouble. You think you are smart. One day you will be too smart." I just laughed and walked off. I knew he wouldn't do anything. He was too soft-hearted. He was always giving free ice creams to kids that had no money. He felt sorry for poor people, the silly fool. There are a lot of stories going around about that ice cream. People said that it was good for you. Some kids said that it made you better when you were sick. One of the kids called it happy ice cream. I didn't believe it. It never made me happy. All the same, there was something strange about it. Take Pimples Peterson, for example. That wasn't his real name. I just called him that because he had a lot of pimples. Anyway, Peppy heard me calling Peterson Pimples. "You are a real mean boy," he said. "You are always picking on someone else just because they are not like you." "Get lost, Peppy," I said. "Go and flog your ice cream somewhere else." Peppy didn't answer me. Instead, he spoke to Pimples. "Here, eat this," he told him. He handed Peterson an ice cream. It was the biggest ice cream I had ever seen. It was coloured purple. Peterson wasn't too sure about it. He didn't think he had enough money for such a big ice cream. "Go on," said Mr. Peppy. "Eat it. I am giving it to you for nothing. It will get rid of your pimples." I laughed and laughed. Ice cream doesn't get rid of pimples. It gives you pimples. Anyway, the next day when Peterson came to school, he had no pimples. Not one. I couldn't believe it. The ice cream had cured his pimples. There were some other strange things that happened too. There was a kid at the school who had a long nose. Boy, was it long. He looked like Pinocchio. When he blew it, you could hear it a mile away. I called him Snozzle. He didn't like being called Snozzle. He used to go red in the face when I said it, and that was every time that I saw him. He didn't say anything back. He was scared that I would punch him up. Peppy felt sorry for Snozzle too. He gave him a small green ice cream every morning for nothing. What a jerk. He never gave me a free ice cream. You won't believe what happened, but I swear it's true. Snozzle's nose began to grow smaller. Every day it grew a bit smaller. In the end, it was just a normal nose. But when it was the right size, Peppy stopped giving him the green ice creams. I made up my mind to put a stop to this ice cream business. Had been eating ice cream the day he got 100 for maths. It must have been the ice cream making him smart. I wasn't going to have anyone doing as well as me. I was the smartest kid in the school, and that's the way I wanted it to stay. I wanted to get a look inside that ice cream van to find out what was going on. I knew where Peppy kept his van at night. He left it in a small lane behind his house. Well, I waited until about 11 o'clock at night. Then I crept out of the house and down to Peppy's van. I took a crowbar, a bucket of sand, a torch, and some bolt cutters with me. There was no one around when I reached the van. I sprang the door open with the crowbar and shone my torch around inside. I had never seen so many tubs of ice cream before. There was every flavour you could think of. There was apple and banana, cherry and mango, blackberry and watermelon, and 50 other flavours. Right at the end of the van were 4 bins with locks on them. I went over and had a look. It was just as I thought. These were his special flavours. Each one had writing on the top. And this is what they said. Happy ice cream for cheering people up. Nose ice cream for long noses. Pimple ice cream for removing pimples. Smart ice cream for smart Alex. Now I knew his secret. That rat Dadian had been eating smart ice cream. That's how he got 100 for maths. I knew there couldn't be anyone as clever as me. I decided to fix Peppy up once and for all. I took out the bolt cutters and cut the locks off the 4 bins. Then I put sand into every bin in the van, except for the smart ice cream. I didn't put any sand in that. I laughed to myself. Peppy wouldn't sell much ice cream now, not unless he started a new flavour, sand ice cream. I looked at the smart ice cream. I decided to eat some. It couldn't do any harm. Not that I needed it. I was already about as smart as you could get. Anyway, I gave it a try. I ate the lot. Once I started, I couldn't stop. It tasted good. It was delicious. I left the van and went home to bed. But I couldn't sleep. To tell the truth, I didn't feel too good. So I decided to write this. Then if any funny business has been going on, you people will know what happened. I think I have made a mistake. I don't think Dadian did get any smart ice cream. It is the next day now. Something is happening to me. I don't feel quite as smart. I have been trying to do a real hard sum. It is 1 and 1. What does 1 and 1 make? Is it 3 or is it 4?
Wunderpants. My dad is not a bad sort of bloke. There are plenty who are much worse. But he does rave on a bit, like if you get muddy when you are catching frogs, or rip your pants when you are building a tree hut, stuff like that. Mostly we understand each other and I can handle him. What he doesn't know doesn't hurt him. If he knew that I kept Snot, my pet rabbit, under the bed, he wouldn't like it, so I don't tell him. That way he is happy, I am happy, and Snot is happy. There are only problems when he finds out what has been going on, like the time that I wanted to see Mad Max 2. The old man said it was a bad movie, too much blood and guts. "It's too violent," he said. "But Dad, it's not fair. All the other kids are going. I'll be the only one in school who hasn't seen it." I went on and on like this. I kept nagging. In the end he gave in. He wasn't a bad old boy. He usually let me have what I wanted after a while, and it was easy to get round him. The trouble started the next morning. He was cleaning his teeth in the bathroom, making noises, humming and gurgling, you know, the sort of thing. And suddenly he stopped. Everything went quiet. Then he came into the kitchen. There was toothpaste around his mouth. He looked like a mad tiger. He was frothing at the mouth.
"What's this?"
he said. He was waving his toothbrush about.
"What's this on my toothbrush?"
Little grey hairs were sticking out of it.
"How did these hairs get on my toothbrush? Did you have my toothbrush, David?"
He was starting to get mad. I didn't know whether to own up or not. Parents always tell you that if you own up, they'll let you off. They say that they won't do anything if you're honest. No punishment. I decided to give it a try. "Yes," I said. "I used it yesterday." He still had toothpaste on his mouth. He couldn't talk properly.
"What are these little grey hairs?"
he asked. "I used it to brush my pet mouse," I answered.
"Your what?"
he screamed. "My mouse." He started jumping up and down and screaming. He ran around in circles holding his throat. Then he ran into the bathroom and started washing his mouth out. There was a lot of splashing and gurgling. He was acting like a madman. I didn't know what all the fuss was about, all that yelling over just a few mouse hairs. After a while he came back into the kitchen. He kept opening and shutting his mouth as if he could taste something bad. He had a mean look in his eye, real mean.
"What are you thinking of?"
he yelled at the top of his voice.
"Are you crazy or something? Are you trying to kill me? Don't you know that mice carry germs? They're filthy things. I'll probably die of some terrible disease."
He went on and on like this for ages. Then he said,
"And don't think that you're going to see Mad Max 2. You can sit at home and think how stupid it is to brush a mouse with someone else's toothbrush."
I went back to my room to get dressed. Dad just didn't understand about that mouse. It was a special mouse, a very special mouse indeed. It was going to make me a lot of money, $50 in fact. Every year there was a mouse race in Smith's barn. The prize was $50, and my mouse, Swift Sam, had a good chance of winning. But I had to look after him. That's why I brushed him with a toothbrush. I knew that Swift Sam could beat every other mouse except one. There was one mouse I wasn't sure about. It was called Mugger, and it was owned by Scrag Murphy, the toughest kid in town. I'd never seen his mouse, but I knew it was fast. Scrag Murphy fed it on a special diet. And this is what I was thinking about as I dressed. I went over to the cupboard to get a pair of underpants. There were none there. "Hey, Mum," I yelled out, "I am out of underpants." Mum came into the room holding something terrible, horrible. It was a pair of homemade underpants. "I made these for you, David." She laughed. "I bought the material at the op shop." There was just the right amount of material for one pair of underpants. "I'm not wearing those," I told her. "No way. Never." "What's wrong with them?" said Mum. She sounded hurt. "They're pink," I said. "And they've got little pictures of fairies on them. I couldn't wear them. Everyone would laugh. I'd be the laughing stock of the school." Underpants with fairies on them in pink, I nearly freaked out. I thought about what Scrag Murphy would say if he ever heard about them. I went red just thinking about it. Just then, Dad poked his head into the room. He still had that mean look in his eye. He was remembering the toothbrush.
"What's going on now?"
he asked in a black voice. "Nothing," I said. "I was just thanking Mum for making me these nice underpants." I pulled on the fairy pants and quickly covered them up with my jeans. At least no one else would know I had them on. That was one thing to be thankful for. The underpants felt strange. They made me tingle all over, and my head felt light. There was something not quite right about those underpants, and I'm not talking about the fairies. I had breakfast and went out to the front gate. Pete was waiting for me. He's my best mate. We always walk to school together. "Have you got your running shoes?" he asked. "Oh, no," I groaned. "I forgot, it's the cross-country race today." I went back and got my running shoes, and I came back out walking very slowly. I was thinking about the race. I would have to go into the changing rooms and get changed in front of Scrag Murphy and all the other boys. They would all laugh their heads off when they saw my fairy underpants. We walked through the park on the way to school, and there was a big lake in the middle. "Let's chuck some stones," said Pete, "so you can throw the furthest." I didn't even answer. I was feeling sick in the stomach. "What's the matter with you?" he asked. "You look like death warmed up." I looked around. There was no one else in the park. "Look at this," I said. I undid my fly and showed Pete the underpants. His eyes bugged out like organ stops. Then he started to laugh. He fell over on the grass and laughed his silly head off. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He really thought it was funny. Some friend. After a while, Pete stopped laughing. "You poor thing," he said. "What are you going to do? Scrag Murphy and the others will never let you forget it." We started throwing stones into the lake. I didn't try very hard. My heart wasn't in it. "Hey," said Pete. "That was a good shot. It went right over to the other side." He was right. The stone had reached the other side of the lake. No one had ever done that before. It was too far. I picked up another stone. This time I threw as hard as I could. The stone went right over the lake and disappeared over some trees. "Wow!" yelled Pete. "That's the best shot I've ever seen. No one can throw that far." He looked at me in a funny way. My skin was all tingling. "I feel strong," I said. "I feel as if I can do anything." I went over to a park bench. It was a large concrete one. I lifted it up with one hand. I held it high over my head. I couldn't believe it. Pete just stood there with his mouth hanging open. He couldn't believe it either. I felt great. I jumped for joy. I sailed high into the air and I went up 3 metres. "What a jump!" yelled Pete. My skin was still tingling, especially under the underpants. "It's the underpants," I said. "The underpants are giving me strength." I grinned. "They're not underpants. They're Wunderpants." "Super jocks," said Pete. We both started cackling like a couple of hens. We laughed until our sides ached. I told Pete not to tell anyone about the Wunderpants. We decided to keep it a secret. Nothing much happened until the cross-country race that afternoon. All the boys went to the changing room to put on their running gear. Scrag Murphy was there. I tried to get into my shorts without him seeing my Wunderpants, but it was no good. He noticed them as soon as I dropped my jeans.
Uh-huh, he shouted. "Look at those baby breeches. Look at his fairy pants."
Everyone looked. They all started to laugh. How embarrassing. They were all looking at the fairies on my Wunderpants. Scrag Murphy was a big fat bloke. He was really tough. He came over and pulled the elastic on my Wunderpants, and then he let it go. "Ouch," I said. "Cut that out, that hurts."
"What's the matter, little diddums?" he said. "Can't you take it?"
He shoved me roughly against the wall. I wasn't going to let him get away with that, so I pushed him back, just a little push. He went flying across the room and crashed into the wall on the other side. I just didn't know my own strength. That little push had sent him all that way. It was the Wunderpants. Scrag Murphy looked at me with shock and surprise that soon turned to a look of hate. But he didn't say anything. No one said anything. They were all thinking I was going to get my block knocked off next time I saw Scrag Murphy. About 40 kids were running in the race. We had to run through the countryside following markers that had been put out by the teachers. It was a hot day, so I decided to wear a pair of shorts but no top. As soon as the starting gun went off, I was off like a flash. I had kept my Wunderpants on, so they were working really well. I went straight out to the front. I'd never run so fast before. As I ran along the road, I passed a man on a bike. He tried to keep up with me, but he couldn't. Then I passed a car. This was really something. This was great. I looked behind. None of the others was in sight. I was miles ahead. The trail turned off the road and into the bush, and I was running along a narrow track in the forest. After a while, I came to a small creek. I was hot, so I decided to have a dip. After all, the others were a long way behind. I had plenty of time. And I took off my shorts and running shoes, but I left the Wunderpants on. I wasn't going to part with them. I dived into the cold water. It was refreshing. I lay on my back looking at the sky. Life was good. These Wunderpants were terrific. I would never be scared of Scrag Murphy while I had them on. Then something started to happen. Something terrible. The Wunderpants started to get tight. They hurt. They were shrinking. They were shrinking smaller and smaller. The pain was awful. I had to get them off. I struggled and wriggled. They were so tight they cut into my skin. In the end, I got them off, and only just in time. They shrank so small they would have only just fit over my thumb. I had a narrow escape. I could have been killed by the shrinking Wunderpants. Just then I heard voices coming. It was the others in the race. I was trapped. I couldn't get out to put on my shorts. There were girls in the race. I had to stay in the middle of the creek in the nude. It took quite a while for the others to run by. They were all spread out along the track. Every time I went to get out of the pool, someone else would come. After a while, Pete stopped at the pool. "What are you doing?" he said. "Even super jocks won't help you win from this far back." "Keep going," I said. "I'll tell you about it later." I didn't want to tell him that I was in the nude. Some girls were with him. Pete and the girls took off along the track. A bit later, the last runner arrived. It was Scrag Murphy. He couldn't run fast. He was carrying too much weight. "Well, look at this," he said. "It's little fairy pants. And what is this we have here?" He picked up my shorts and running shoes from the bank of the creek. Then he ran off with them. "Come back," I screamed. "Bring those back here." He didn't take any notice. He just laughed and kept running. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a stitch of clothing. I didn't even have any shoes. I was starting to feel cold. The water was freezing. I was covered in goose pimples and my teeth were chattering. In the end, I had to get out. I would have frozen to death if I'd stayed in the water any longer. I went and sat on a rock in the sun and tried to think of a way to get home without being seen. It was all right in the bush. I could always hide behind a tree if someone came. But once I reached the road, I would be in trouble. I couldn't just walk along the road in the nude. Then I had an idea. I looked at the tiny underpants. I couldn't put them on, but they still might work. I put them over my thumb and jumped. It was no good. It was just an ordinary small jump. I picked up a stone and threw it. It only went a short way. Not much of a throw at all. The pants were too small, and I was my weak old self again. I lay down on the rock in the sun. Ants started to crawl over me, and then the sun went behind a cloud. I started to get cold, but I couldn't walk home, not in the raw. I felt miserable. I looked around for something to wear, but there was nothing, just trees, bushes, and grass. I knew I would have to wait until dark. The others would have all gone home by now. Pete would think I'd gone home, and my parents would think I was at his place. No one was going to come and help me. I started to think about Scrag Murphy. He was going to pay for this. I would get him back somehow. Time went slowly, but at last it started to grow dark. I made my way back along the track. I was in bare feet and I kept standing on stones. Branches reached out and scratched me in all sorts of painful places. Then I started to think about snakes. What if I stood on one? There were all sorts of noises in the dark. The moon had gone in and it was hard to see where I was going. I have to admit it, I was scared stiff. To cheer myself up, I started to think about what I was going to do to Scrag Murphy. Boy, was he going to get it. At last I came to the road. I was glad to be out of the bush. My feet were cut and bleeding and I hobbled along. And every time a car went by, I had to dive into the bushes. I couldn't let myself get caught in the headlight of the cars. I wondered what I was going to do when I reached the town. There might be people around. I broke off a branch from a bush and held it in front of my you-know-what. It was prickly, but it was better than nothing, and by the time I reached the town it was late. There was no one around. I had to be careful. Someone might come out of a house at any minute. I ran from tree to tree and wall to wall, hiding in the shadows as I went. Luckily for me, the moon was in and it was very dark. Then I saw something that gave me an idea, a phone box. I opened the door and stepped inside. A dim light shone on my naked body. I hoped that no one was looking. I had no money, but Peter told me that if you yell into the earpiece, they can hear you on the other end. It was worth a try. I dialed our home number. Dad answered.
Yes?
He said. I'm in the nude, I shouted. I've lost my clothes. Help! Help!
Hello? Hello? Who's there?
Said Dad. I shouted at the top of my voice, but Dad just kept saying,
Hello?
He sounded cross. Then I heard him say to Mum,
It's probably that boy up to his tricks again.
He hung up the phone. I decided to make a run for it. It was the only way. I dropped my bush and started running. I went for my life. I reached our street without meeting a soul, and I thought I was safe, but I was wrong. I crashed right into someone and sent them flying. It was old Mrs. Jeeves from across the road. Sorry, I said. Gee, I'm sorry. I helped her stand up. She was a bit short-sighted, and it was dark. She hadn't noticed that I didn't have any clothes on. Then the moon came out, the blazing moon. I tried to cover my nakedness with my hands, but it was no good.
Disgusting!
She screeched.
Disgusting! I'll tell your father about this!
I ran home as fast as I could. I went in the back door and jumped into the bed. I tried to pretend that I was asleep. And downstairs I could hear Mrs. Jeeves yelling at Dad, and then the front door closed. I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. Well, I really copped it. I was in big trouble. Dad went on and on.
What are you thinking of, lad? Running around in the nude, losing all your clothes? What will the neighbours think?
He went on like that for about a week. I couldn't tell him the truth. He wouldn't believe it. No one would. The only ones who knew the whole story were Pete and I. Dad grounded me for a month. I wasn't allowed out of the house except to go to school. No pictures, no swimming, nothing, and no pocket money either. It was a bad month. Very bad indeed. At school, Scrag Murphy gave me a hard time. He called me Fairy Pants. Everyone thought it was a great joke, and there was nothing I could do about it. He was just too big for me, and all his mates were tough guys.
This is serious,
said Pete. We have to put Scrag Murphy back in his box. They're starting to call me Friend of Fairy Pants now. We have to get even. We thought and thought, but we couldn't come up with anything. And then I remembered the mouse race in Smith's barn. We will win the mouse race, I shouted. It's in a month's time. We can use the next month to train my mouse. That's it, said Pete. The prize is $50. Scrag Murphy thinks he's going to win. It will really get up his nose if we take off the prize. I went and fetched Swift Sam. He's small, I said, but he's fast. I bet he can meet Murphy's mouse. It's called Mugger. We started to train Swift Sam. Every day after school we took him around a track in the backyard. We tied a piece of cheese on the end of a bit of string. Swift Sam chased after it as fast as he could. After 6 laps we gave him the piece of cheese to eat. At the start he could do 6 laps in 10 minutes. By the end of the month he was down to 3 minutes.
Scrag Murphy, look out, said Pete with a grin. We are really going to beat the pants off you this time.
The day of the big race came at last. There were about 100 kids in Smith's barn. No adults knew about it. They probably would have stopped it if they knew. It cost 50 cents to get in. That's where the prize money came from. A kid called Tiger Gleason took up the money and gave out the prize at the end. He was the organiser of the whole thing. Scrag Murphy was there, of course.
It's in the bag, he swaggered. Mugger can't lose. I fed him on a special diet. He's the fittest mouse in the country. He will eat Swift Sam. Just you wait and see.
I didn't say anything. I was very keen to see his mouse Mugger. Scrag Murphy had it in a box. No one had seen it yet.
Right,
said Tiger.
Get out, you mice.
I put Swift Sam down on the track. He looked very small. He started sniffing around. I hoped he would run as fast as the other mice there. He hadn't had any match practice before. Then the others put their mice on the track. Everyone except Scrag Murphy. He still had Mugger in the box. Scrag Murphy put his hand in the box and took out Mugger. He was the biggest mouse I had ever seen. He was at least 10 times as big as Swift Sam.
Hey, said Pete, that's not a mouse, that's a rat. You can't race a rat. It's not fair. It's not a rat,
said Scrag Murphy in a threatening voice.
It's just a big mouse. I've been feeding it up.
I looked at it again. It was a rat all right. It was starting to attack the mice.
We will take a vote,
said Tiger.
All those that think it's a rat, put your hands up.
He counted all the hands.
50,
he said.
Now all those that say Mugger is a mouse, put your hands up.
He counted again.
52. Mugger is a mouse.
Scrag Murphy and his gang started to cheer. He had brought all his mates with him. It was a put-up job.
Right,
said Tiger Gleason.
Ready to race.
There were about 10 mice in the race, or should I say 9 mice and 1 rat. 2 rats if you counted Scrag Murphy. All the owners took out their string and cheese.
Go,
shouted Tiger Gleason. Mugger jumped straight onto the little mouse next to him and bit him on the neck. The poor little thing fell over and lay still. Boo! Yelled some of the crowd. Swift Sam ran to the front straight away. He was going really well. Then Mugger started to catch up. It was neck and neck for 5 laps. First Mugger would get in front, then Swift Sam. Everyone in the barn went crazy. They were yelling their heads off. By the 6th lap, Mugger started to fall behind. All the other mice were not in the race. They had been lapped twice by Mugger and Swift Sam, but Mugger couldn't keep up with Swift Sam. He was about a tail behind. Suddenly something terrible happened. Mugger jumped onto Swift Sam's tail and grabbed it in his teeth. The crowd started to boo. Even Scrag Murphy's mates were booing. But Swift Sam kept going. He didn't stop for a second. He just pulled that great rat along after him. It rolled over and over behind the little mouse. Mugger held on for grim death, but he couldn't stop Swift Sam.
What a mouse!
Screamed the crowd as Swift Sam crossed the finishing line, still towing Mugger behind him. Scrag Murphy stormed out of the barn. He didn't even take Mugger with him. Tiger handed me the $50. Then he held up Swift Sam.
Swift Sam is the winner,
he said.
The only mouse in the world with his own little pair of fairy underpants.